Hey, Mr. Polito, can you hear us okay? It's John.
Yes, I can. Thank you so much for joining us today too, John. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Everybody on? Everybody on? Board members?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, as we open the meeting, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance followed by a moment of silence. And during that, I ask everyone's thoughts to be with the Feeney family. Our board member Darlene has a brother-in-law who's gravely ill at this moment. Also, please think of the family of Bishop Brock, our ally, whose sister-in-law passed away this week. And as Mrs. Feeney brought to our attention, Mr. John Lewis, an American hero who passed away this week. Among the thoughts that we have in our moment of silence after the Pledge of Allegiance, please keep that in mind. Thank you. Let's all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America and to the republic
for which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. First up, we have with us from the Erie County Department of Health, Mr. John McEnroe, the Erie County Safety and Training Coordinator. He's here to lend his expertise and perhaps answer some questions for those who have pertinent questions for him. Mr. McEnroe, thank you, and you're on.
Okay, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. With me, I have Chelsea Bates. Chelsea Bates is with the Department of Health, and she is the Operations Section Chief for the COVID-19 response here in Erie County. You see us kind of goofy looking on the screen. We're just trying to stay distant. If at any time either of us are talking and you have a hard time hearing us, let us know. We'll reposition so you guys could hear better.
You're loud and clear.
Okay, great. So I guess the easiest way to start is I will give you my best summary of where we're at in our response and the support that we're providing for school districts. I'm normally not a health department guy. I was tasked in March to assist the health department with the COVID-19 response. So I was pulled out of my safety training position, transplanted over to the health department to assist. So I've been assisting the health department in several different areas, one of which is as a liaison with the school districts. The first big function that I served was assisting with graduation plans and traditional end of year activities that schools would normally conduct. Realistically, my role was to ensure districts were informed in terms of guidance handed down from the state, B, assist with the interpretation of that guidance, and then C, either answer questions or find answers to questions when I didn't have them. So since that time, that's kind of the approach that I've taken with our team here to assist the school districts. So here we are. We've kind of transitioned into now we're talking about the reopening plans, health and safety plans for all the districts. First thing I'd like to say on that, although I'm not in your positions or the positions of the superintendents, I have a very realistic understanding of the complicated mess that you all have in terms of making these decisions and developing a usable, competent plan to safely bring your students and staff back to school. I'm glad that I'm sitting on this side of the screen and I don't have everything that you guys have. So it's a definite challenge, and I sympathize, and I hope that our team provides some support and at least makes those tasks a little bit easier for you all. The next thing I would say on the reopening piece, I think, as frustrating as it is, flexibility is probably going to be your biggest ally. You've got a lot of internal and external components that are going to make this entire process difficult, challenging. So if you guys can remain flexible at all and not be afraid to change course if you identify an area where you need to, I think in the long run, that'll be beneficial. Third, guidance. We are extremely frustrated with the guidance that's been received. Initially, we got very vague guidance from different organizations, and in some cases, that guidance was contradictory. We get that guidance, we dissect it, we immediately send questions back to the state. We receive questions from superintendents. We try to answer those. If we can't, we send those questions to the state. And then we ask for answers to those specific questions. In many instances, we receive vague answers back. So I've had some pretty spirited discussions with all the superintendents, and I'm hoping again that we're helping them. Now, it is promising to me the guidance that was issued on July 16th, which was PDE and the State Department of Health coming together to provide that guidance, was much better than any guidance we had received in the past. So that's a bit encouraging. And then last night, the CDC issued some guidance as well, specific to K through 12, that I think is good information, somewhat general, but a lot of key points that will help focus all of your efforts on this reopening process. So I think that's all in a nutshell in terms of me providing information up front. Now, I will be happy to answer any questions, concerns that you all have. And to preface that, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know it. But I'll do my best to try to find the answer to you. And on that note, I'm not a clinician. I'm not clinically trained for medical stuff. So if there is a medical specific question, I'm probably going to defer and talk to either Dr. Nadworny or Shar Behringer at the health department before providing an answer. Some of the medical related questions I may answer, and it's just because they've already given me the answers in previous question and answer situations.
Thank you, Mr. McEnroe. None of us are omnipotent, and I appreciate you being with us. Let me just understand something and perhaps clarify it. Can I describe you as a conduit to us from the State Department of Health?
No.
No?
So I'm with the Erie County Department of Health.
Yes. When you say you take direction and you have unclear directions at some point from Harrisburg, when we say the same thing, we're talking about from the Department of Education. And so there are different state departments that have sometimes been less than clear on what their expectations and requirements are. I'm just trying to clarify that.
Yes, so just to clarify it further. So I've been attached to the Erie County Department of Health. Most of the guidance we receive comes from the CDC, the State Department of Health, Pennsylvania Department of Education, as well as DCED. Remember what that stands for?
I guess it's not a major point. I just wanted to clarify that when we all say Harrisburg this and Harrisburg that, we get direct direction from the Department of Education, but you your health department is a separate consideration, and they are involved in setting their own parameters too. That's all.
Yep.
Any board members want to question or ask or comment, Mr. McEnroe?
Yes, Mr. President, I have several questions for Mr. McEnroe.
Mr. Nichols?
First of all, Mr. McEnroe, I want to thank you for your efforts on the graduation efforts. I attended for a couple hours the collegiate and Erie High graduations, and I thought they were very well done. I was particularly impressed at Erie High that in their auditorium they had large fans moving the air through the building and out into the open air, which is this huge problem we have with ventilation. And so I want to thank you for those efforts. I'm, my general comment on it, on Erie County is that the county's been kind of tight-fisted with the data as far as releasing it to the public. They talk about zones. They don't identify particular hotspots. So my first question would be, we have 838 cases here in Erie County. Roughly how many of these would be in the city as opposed to the county?
I'd have no idea. So I can tell you in terms of the data and the information that they release, they try to be very mindful of the different communities, not only within the city, but within the county. So if there is a specific 2 or 3 block area that maybe has a high refugee population or a certain nationality or something like that, they try to ensure, excuse me, that they don't release anything that would be personally identifiable. So, in accordance with HIPAA regulations, they try to be extra careful with that stuff. Now, this is a personal opinion, and Chelsea might yell at me here in a second. The other tricky piece there is a lot of this data is not simple. We've got 7 cases here. Because of the positive cases and then the presumed cases, as well as the number of contacts. So it spider webs and it gets complicated very fast. So I think there's some reservations there that they put out these numbers for this specific location. And then we find out a week later that, well, 2 of those tests that were positive last week turned out to be negative because there is some issue with the testing viability, I guess. So I think that they're exercising caution. I know that's probably not the question you're looking for, or the answer you're looking for, but that's the best.
Well, and I'll tell you where this particularly comes in on the safety issue. You've been not reporting where things are happening. So let's say we have an outbreak at a school, which is likely. Is that going to be you're just going to say in the Erie County, we had 3 students that tested positive, and you're not going to tell the public which school, what grade? You're not going to provide the public with information such as that? That's been the way it's been done so far. And as far as I'm concerned, how can this be safe if information like that isn't made to the public? One of the many flaws of this plan is it leaves it up to the parents to make the decision. I don't think it should be left up to them. I favor opening on a remote basis for the first month. If some of the suburban districts want to open, fine. We'll see how they'll do. We'll learn from that. We will have our ventilation study by that time, and hopefully we'll have made some progress with that. But will the public be informed of what schools are having the COVID problem or not by the county? Do you know that at this time?
It is my guess at this point, and I would say this is an educated guess. The county health department would not release that information.
Okay.
So what we have in place right now is we want to keep that communication with the school district open. So we have a plan that will be discussed in detail on July 29th with a training we're providing to all the school districts. And it's specific to the contact tracing piece. So Department of Health, Erie County Department of Health and school district will communicate when either becomes aware of a positive in a school district. The two entities will then try to determine how big of an exposure actually occurred through the contact tracing. And then collectively, we can come to an agreement on how to disseminate what information. I can tell you the information provided should be different for different audiences. And what I mean by that is if, as an example, let's say XYZ high school has a positive case. I think the entire district should be informed, but the information provided to the elementary school building is probably going to be different than that provided to the high school families, if that makes sense.
One thing we don't have with this is the luxury of time.
Mm-hmm.
What is the current test turnaround in Erie County?
That depends. Chelsea's going to jump in here.
So it really depends if it's done, if the tests are done and they go through the state lab. It's usually about a 48-hour turnaround, give or take. But if the tests are done at any of the public testing sites throughout the county and they go through labs like Quest, those a lot of times take a lot longer. It can be up to like 5 days we've seen because there's really a backlog with tests. So it really depends where the test is done.
And you can see where I'm going with this. If it takes 5 days to get a test back, and then you're going to do contact tracing, it may be too late.
Absolutely.
You have several hundred people in each of these buildings, and time and again in this country, there have been nursing homes with 40 people dead before they even are aware of what's going on. And the time issue, we don't control the test. I mean, I'm not blaming the county for that. The test turnaround, and of course, as the problem gets more grave, the tests slow down. That's what's happening in the South right now. So it gets worse. Next question I have is, what is our current infection rate in Erie County?
I have absolutely no idea. That's something that we can check with Dr. Nadwarny and Shar, and I can try to get an answer back to Mr. Polito soon.
In other words, here's where I'm going on this one. Many of these agencies tell us, and we're the school board directors who have to make decisions on this because the government has avoided it. The governor hasn't said anything. Our county executive hasn't said anything. Our president, until today, was promoting opening the schools. Now he's backing up a little, but he does that because his polls are dropping. So we're not getting guidance really from anybody, because how the hell do we know what is safe? Now, Governor Cuomo has come up with a plan where if the infection rate is above 5, you don't open the schools. It has to be below 5 or 5 or below. If it goes over 9, they're closed. So he has come up with that. I think California has something similar. The infection rate in Pennsylvania as a whole right now is 5.6%. Allegheny County, which has the same crazy plan we have, where just leave it up to the parents whether their kids are put at risk or not, they're at 8%. So under the New York standard, and New York has suffered badly with this, under the New York standard, we would not be able to open at this time. So that's why I asked what our current infection rate. The next question would be, has Governor Wolf come up with a similar standard, a similar infection parameter to give everybody guidance on when schools should be opened and closed?
Not that we're aware of in terms of metrics. So last week when the information came out, the one comment that he had both in his order and the press conference that we picked up on was he would look at individual school districts when considering closures. So my takeaway from that was, I don't think the state is looking at statewide saying schools can only go virtual come fall. I think they are looking, and when I say they, Governor's Office, Department of Health, PDE, I think they are looking and trying to implement a communication aspect that will allow them to make decisions on specific areas. Again, this is an opinion. I have a feeling we would have to see something significant in this area for the state to get involved to shut a school down. I can't define significant though.
Would you agree that our school district population,
Mr. Nichols, I want to give other board members a chance, and we have many other things to discuss relating to this. Up to now, this has been helpful, but we're not here to critique the mission and the work of the health department.
we're trying to evaluate their ability to respond. This is a life and death issue. And we've
You're asking this guy to answer questions.
got an issue here as to what the county does for backup. The plan that was presented said the health department is going to handle all the issues. Mr. McEnroe has been forthcoming with us. They're not ready for this.
That's your conclusion, but please,
Yes.
we have other board members who have questions and concerns, certainly.
I have more questions and I'll ask them later.
Well,
That's-
I would
On this, Mr. President, it hasn't been done before by our paid staff. I'm doing it, and don't
God bless you.
I would like to.
back my work product. These questions are important questions.
All right, they've been asked, but quit repeating them, please. We've got to make decisions too for what we do in the school district.
Yes, we do.
We can't sit here and gab about what California is.
I'm not gabbing. I'm putting facts forward.
Further you are.
Presented more facts than Mr. McEnroe. A little respect, Mr. President. I am the oldest person on this board.
Some respect for Mr. McEnroe too. Is there any other board members that want to come in on this? While we have Mr. McEnroe?
Mr. President, I had a question.
Look,
Does this include the buses as well? Because I have some questions that were sent to me by some concerned people about the buses, and Mr. President, you can tell me at what time is appropriate for me to ask those questions, because I really don't know when the appropriate time will be. And I don't. But my question would be, I just, my question would be, does their assistance include busing? Like, does it include the buses? That's my question.
if it pertains to the Department of Health, let's ask those questions. Mr. McEnroe, is that a question you can answer or want to weigh in on?
Well, we have had a lot of discussions about busing. It's my understanding that a large portion of the Erie City School District, the busing is conducted by EMTA. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And we have had the health department, we've had discussions with EMTA in terms of not only for the public, but come school time, the guidance, we've provided them with guidance and suggestions on how to perform the busing procedure safely. And, that goes back to reducing the number of students on each bus, cleaning between runs, making sure disinfection is happening at least twice a day, or in the morning before runs and when they're done. Spacing on the buses, masking while on the buses. We've even talked about some suggestions where bus drivers could possibly perform certain screening functions. The complicated thing that you guys have is you have the EMTA as opposed to some districts who have their own bus service. So you guys have another hurdle there working with that organization to implement all these controls. Now,
we did have among our hopes and plans, Mr. McEnroe, to expand the use of our yellow bus fleet, and quite amazingly, we came up with a plan we thought would work. We didn't get that far with it yet, but that was a hoped for outcome of our whole effort to plan for this.
right.
So that's still there.
And I can add with the buses, talking with all the school districts, I think the busing is a major hurdle from a couple different aspects. Financially, it's going to be an issue. Second, parent perception of kids getting on buses. And when you look at a bus, if you have one child per seat, how many runs do you have to add to maintain that and get everybody to school. So that's definitely going to be a challenge. I know Mr. Polito sent out, I think, a survey. So you guys should have some information on what your district looks like in terms of transportation needs.
Okay.
And then just a follow-up question to that. Okay, so some of the questions that have been posed to me, and some as a parent that I'm supposed to have kids bus, but I'm not gonna have them bus because of this very reason. The questions are like, what happens if there's a confirmed case of COVID with one of the students who were on the bus? What happens when how much, like, and I know this might not be a question. I don't know if it's a question for you or Brian or whoever, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. So while it's still in my memory, what happens when um you know how is it going to be? Is there going to be like a quarantine? Like if one of the students was on the bus and we noticed him coughing and sneezing, took his temperature again, and he had, and come to find out they have COVID, are we going to quarantine all the students that's been on that bus? What's going to happen to the staff? What if one of them end up having COVID? What's the procedure for the students that are on the bus? For the staff that's on the thing? And what happens with that? Like, do the students all have to be quarantined because the bus driver had COVID? Just questions like that. It's a big deal because a lot of students are bused. So I know we're concerned about the inside of the buildings, but also we need to be concerned about the buses as well. And what happens when things are occurring on the bus, and with the bus being such a small space, you probably don't have no choice but to have to quarantine all of those people that's on the bus. So that's a big concern for me and other people, is the busing situation, which even may get a little bit more sticky than inside of the building. So that's my question for right now.
Yep, good question. So we've had a lot of discussions about this. So what I can tell you is, whether you're in a bus or in a building, once there is an identified exposure, again, that communication between the district and the health department is paramount. That's a big deal. So once the health department becomes aware that Erie City School District had an exposure, they will initiate the contact tracing piece, that spider web I talked about. They're going to identify that one person and try to identify everybody else that was deemed a close contact. A close contact is an individual that was within 6 feet of that person for 15 minutes or longer. Okay? So that's why you see on TV, everybody talks about the social distancing, staying 6 feet or further away. Where the district is going to have an integral part in helping this, whether you're in classroom, lunchroom, or on a bus, if the district can maintain seating charts, assigned seats with seating charts. If we find out last Friday, little Johnny rode the bus to school, was in class A, B, and C, and we have the seating charts for each of those bus and those 3 classrooms, then the school district could provide contact information of all those individuals to the Department of Health contact tracers. They would then make the calls to all those individuals. Now, specific to the one thing you said, you asked if everybody on the bus would have to be quarantined. Not necessarily. If they were within the 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, I would say yes, they're going to get quarantined. But if little Susie gets on the bus, she's in the front, little Johnny was in the back, and you're 2 minutes from school, she may not be identified as a close contact, if that makes sense. This information and that question, great question. And those are the things that we've had medical staff talking to the superintendents about. That is specifically the type of information on July 29th that the medical staff at the health department are going to spend 4 hours talking to the superintendent, the pandemic coordinator, and school nurses about.
Are there any other board members with questions for Mr. McEnroe? Oh, I'm sorry. Lori had her hand up, I was advised, and then Darlene. Lori first.
So I have a question. So I was on a meeting 2 days ago, and this is involving like people in the district. So it was identified that the 16503 zip code was the hotspot. So where did that information? If you're saying they're not identifying zip codes and all of that, now like how did that even be? That is in a meeting where there's a school in that zip code. So what is your thoughts on all of that? If that is the area of the hotspot, and that is already the information that school is made aware of.
Yeah, Chelsea might be able to talk a little more specific on this, but since the beginning, the county had put on their website maps with hotspots.
Mm-hmm.
There were zones.
Yeah, there were zones, I think. So there could have been a couple zip codes within a zone. But generally speaking, if you were to look at that map, you can see the general areas where the higher number of cases are.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying not to identify specific areas that could potentially identify a specific group of people, if that makes sense.
So that that all makes sense. So I guess my next question would be, since you're talking to us from the school perspective, are you encouraging, or would you encourage that schools in those hotspot areas take extra precaution? Like they might have to look a little bit more, may have like an extreme difference from maybe I don't know, a school that's in a 1650, I don't know, one zip code, wherever, would that be a suggestion of yours, or what are your thoughts, insight into that?
So I think that's a very valuable comment. And if you look nationally, there's different parts of the countries that have less COVID cases, period. So I think that every school district in Erie, Pennsylvania, Erie County, should not have the exact same measures in place because every school district is different. Possibly the number of cases they have in their region different. There may be more compliance in one area than the other, which has helped keeping community spread down, let's say. Likewise, I think that depending on how big your school district is, you may have a different aspect of a plan for different buildings. Not only based on that area, but it could be based on the age of your children.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily treat a high schooler the same way that I would a kindergartner.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do some different things there, and that's what teachers are so good about.
Mm-hmm.
Adapting what they need to adapt to certain populations of kids. So I don't think it'd be a bad idea to look at specific areas to determine if you have to do anything special in terms of mitigation to help prevent spread in those areas.
Okay.
Darlene? Oh, Darlene?
Yes, thank you. John, thank you very much for being here today.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we extrapolate a little bit on what Lori just asked you? Because I had the same questions.
Okay.
Can you guide us on what kind of metrics we should be looking at in making those decisions? Or will you, as a county health department, or do you know if under the guidance PA health department is saying that when they see metrics that have them concerned, that they're immediately going to contact our school district and let us know this general, like you said, the zip code or the area of the community that might be potentially growing into a hotspot. And then if it is growing into a hotspot, what would you be looking for in metrics? If we had to close that school, what would you be looking for us to be able to reopen that school?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And we have sent that exact question up to the state on a number of occasions. We have not received specific guidance on metrics. I can tell you the guidance that was sent out by the CDC last night. They do break down levels of community transmission. And there's 4 levels. No to minimal community transmission, minimal to moderate community transmission, substantial but controlled, and then substantial and uncontrolled. I've already sent the question to get finite definitions to these 4 levels. I can guess what they are, but that would do none of us any good here, and it's not providing a metric. So I will continue to get that. Mr. Polito, I would say this one, if we could jot this one down, this will be a great discussion for Char Behringer on the 29th. And hopefully by that point, I get some concrete definitions on these 4 categorizations of community spread. So, and to answer further, I would say in terms of metrics are good because it gives you a concrete answer. But when I said earlier about being flexible, if we, health department, sees a trend and stuff starts to increase, you guys would have to be comfortable, minus a metric, saying cases are going up, we might have to look at plan B here if we don't receive the metric. And the only reason I mention that is because we have not received metrics from the state since March 16th when I got involved. So I'm not necessarily hopeful that they're going to hand us a formula saying, when you get this number of cases for this many square miles in this population, you need to shut down. I'm just not confident that that'll happen.
John, would you also be willing to elaborate for us some of the guidance that you feel that we do not have yet from the Department of Ed that would benefit our school district in making these difficult decisions? Guidance that you've been looking for as well?
Most of the guidance that we collectively have been looking for are based on specific scenarios. The guidance received July 16th from the collaboration between PDE and DOH at the state was much better. And I think, again, I'm not a superintendent, I'm not a school board, but I think it provides much better direction than what we had before. I mean, it's head and shoulders, in my opinion, above what we had before. So I think that we have a lot of the general information we need now. And some of you might not like this, but it's the common sense stuff we've heard for 3 months now. 6 feet, wear masks, wash your hands. Those are probably the 3 biggest. And prior to being assigned to the health department, I don't know if I would have the same opinion that I have today about those 3 things. I can tell you each that I have personally been around, based on the duties I had with the health department, confirmed positive cases. I paid attention to those nurses and doctors probably before going into those situations because I was nervous about it. Those things worked for me. So I think those 3 things are probably paramount in your planning and in your decision making. If that helps.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. Then when you say hand washing, would you recommend that it would be prudent for us to have hand washing stations as being a more effective means of limiting spread than sanitizing stations, like sanitizers?
Yep. So hand washing is good. That's probably the primary means that you want to enact. The hand sanitizer, you want to ensure that the hand sanitizer is 60% alcohol or greater content. And then that is used when we are unable to wash our hands. So if there's an area of a school building that you can't afford or you can't fit another hand washing station in, try to have that hand sanitizer there and available so you can utilize that until someone can get to a hand washing station.
Thank you very much, John.
You bet.
Mr. President.
There you go.
Mr. McEnroe, thank you for joining us. Is there a plan for yourself or a representative from the Erie County Health Department to occasionally visit the schools and just check up to ensure that each of the schools are following through with the recommended guidance?
Yes. So we asked for 4 new folks to get hired by the county and serve as strike teams to go out to the districts. That has yet to be approved. So we have utilized and shuffled some people around. Right now, we have 2 folks identified. That information has gone out to the school districts, and I think we are scheduling to begin that the first week in August. Now, with only 2 folks, there's a lot of schools in Erie. I put a caveat when I sent this out to all the superintendents. We are going to do our absolute best to get to every district before school opens. We also put a limit on the number of buildings in each district we would visit. So we're limiting that to 2 buildings per district. So the district is going to have to determine what 2 buildings do we want those health department representatives to come in and look at. Third, when they show up, they're going to have a pre-formatted checklist of key COVID-19 related things to look at. Once we leave, that's not the blessing saying you guys aren't going to have any cases. That is strictly for informational purposes, to help where we can help, to identify any potential shortcomings you may have, and to say, hey, that's a great idea, and then share that with other districts. So hopefully, once those teams, the discussions we have with the districts now, once those teams start going out and visiting the districts, we're hoping that we start to develop, again, being flexible, develop a plan that's going to sustain us long term.
Any other board members have
Thank you.
questions, Mr. Macro?
Mr. Titus.
Tyler?
I have a couple questions. One being, if I'm hearing correctly, this plan and the safety of this plan working is essentially completely contingent upon the students complying with mask wearing, washing hands, and maintaining the social distance.
I would say partly, but it also includes staff. So
Correct.
staff
So,
have to do the same.
So, but if the staff, the adults are gonna, we let's assume that the adults do it, but then the other critical piece is that the students all have to comply with this plan for the spread to be mitigated.
Generally, I would agree with that.
Okay. And so then the second question that I have is there any discussion around long-term impacts, even for those who maybe don't show, like especially with young people, students, the long-term impacts, like is there compromise to liver, is there compromise to lungs, is there compromise to heart? Do we know any of this yet?
I absolutely do not. I'm jotting that down. And you're talking long-term medical effects to a younger student being exposed or positive.
Yes. And here's why I bring that up. Just because we know that we have a very large population of Black and Brown students, of immigrant and refugee students. Yep. We know that. We also know that we're enduring a lot of racism in our community, as a state, as a nation. We know, statistically speaking and medically speaking, that especially Black families do not have the same medical access that white families do. We know that. That's not debatable. That's not an opinion. That's just what the facts are. And if we're serving a student population with a majority or a large that are Black, are we jeopardizing and then putting them at risk for long-term harm? Because they're facing things like racism, they're facing things like systematic oppression. Now they're going to be facing even more complicated health risks. That's so I'm thinking long term, like maybe we're able to mitigate. Doesn't mean we can stop the spread, but what are we doing long term to these students, and are we setting them up? We already know that there's a higher risk for cardiac issues within the Black community. We know that there's a higher risk for diabetes within the Black community. Are we contributing to that as a district if we can't stop the spread?
So here's what I would say medically. I'm definitely not the guy to answer that. But the 29th, that's another one I've started here for Shar to talk about. I would also encourage you all to conduct research as well. Just try to vet your sources. You know what I mean? I have seen information regarding potential long-term effects to different demographics, age, race, all that stuff. But I don't know what's viable. I don't know what's legit. So honestly, what I do, I listen to Dr. Nadwarny and Shar Behringer. I trust them. That's the information that I take and believe in. I have not heard either of them talk specifically about that question, so I don't have a good answer for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we have a couple other allies that want to give their perspective to us today. So I'll first ask if there's any more questions from board members or our staff for John McEnroe while we still have him, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Sure. Mr.
Yes.
President, I have one more question.
Yes, it might have been a voice we haven't heard.
Yes, me, Rose.
Oh, okay, Rose.
Okay, I just have one question. Mr. McEnroe, did you look over our plan?
I did.
Okay. And I saw that you made notes about what we needed to change.
Recommendations.
So is it safe to say that you're comfortable with our plan the way it is
Yes.
if the changes are made?
Yes. And I think that every plan I've looked at so far, I have not seen a negligent or severely lacking plan from any district yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I do want to add to that something Mr. Nichols said earlier. The plan does not say the health department is going to take care of everything if there's a problem. We are going to work with every district to every extent possible. And one thing to keep in mind, I kind of spelled out that contact tracing piece. That is the initial function and how we expect it to work. But I got to be honest with you. If Erie School District, General McLean, and Mill Creek have 8 exposures next week, and each of those children were exposed to or had close contacts, 50 each, 60 each, that's going to stress the few contact tracers we have at the health department. So at that point, and I don't have a definite line for you, but at that point, the health department's going to go back to the district, say, okay, we need some bodies. We need some people to come help us start dialing numbers and contacting families. Mr. Nichols did bring up a very good point, though. In many instances, and we've already seen it with the contact tracing piece now, not in a congregate setting like a school, but one individual has several different contacts. When we find out that person was positive, it may be a week later based on the testing results, like Chelsea said. So we're already behind the power curve there. B, the contact tracing piece is much harder than I initially thought it would be. I'm thinking, not a big deal. You got a list of numbers, start calling people. There are people that refuse to talk to the health department. There are people that will not provide information. So I think that the district could help there with imploring families. If you get a call from the health department or the school district, and they're trying to do the contact tracing piece, it's going to be better for everybody if we get everybody identified, contact information, and that important information to everybody that needs it. I think we're still going to see some resistance here and there, but if we could get a majority of folks to actively participate in that process, it's going to be better for all of us long term.
Okay, Mr. McEnroe.
Mr.
Mr.
President, I have one more question.
But I had raised my hand too. I don't know if y'all paying attention to
All right.
this. Okay, so my question would be I wonder with the health department guidelines, under what condition do you say, okay, there's 10 kids in this school with COVID, 2 teachers. When do the health department tell us we got to shut it down? Like, is there some type of guidelines that you have as far as when the school has to say, okay, well, it's too dangerous, we have to shut it down? How many cases, me personally, and I told Brian this, my perspective is to put a cap on the amount of kids that can come into the schools, and every family that wants to do in-person learning needs to register, so we know exactly how many people want to do it, so that we have numbers that are accurate ASAP, and not 2 weeks from now. I'm talking about ASAP. So then we can determine, is it even an issue of how many kids are going to be in school? Because it might not even be that many kids that want to be in these schools. We don't know, but we don't have the information to be able to determine that either. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, if we say, hey, Piper Burley can get 250 kids in the schools, we can accommodate that and still do social distancing while everybody else do distance learning, distance learning. So 250 kids in there, 50 people get COVID or exposed to it, or you find out there's some type of contact tracing and you start getting everybody some stuff going on. So at what point do we say, hey, this is not working? When does the health department say, hey, you got to close these schools down? We got too many people crossing paths. And then also with the contact tracing, are we tracing? I'm assuming that you're not going to just trace what happens in the school, but that if you get a alert that the parent got COVID, so now the child that's coming to school is exposed. Do we tell that child to quarantine and not come to school? How is that? That's also a factor that's going to play. Is this not what's going on inside the building? It's also what's going to be happening outside the building, because you have all these different families coming from all different areas into the building, and that's going to be an issue because you're going to have to do contact tracing times two when it comes to the school district, because you're not just dealing with the people that's inside of the building, you're also dealing with people that's outside of the building. So I just want to ensure that the health department will be doing some contact tracing all the way around, because it's going to be a little bit more difficult than just doing the contact tracing when somebody just walks into the health department and hey, they get tested positive for COVID. So now they got to tell you who they was all around and give you their numbers and you call them. Yep. Now you have to contact a lot more people, and it's going to be a lot more involved if it's done, in my eyes, the right way. Yep. So those are my questions. How are you going to do contact tracing? Because it can't look the same as it does now, because it's different. And when do you say, hey, this is enough? It's too many people that's contracting it, too many cases, too many variables. When do we shut it down?
Okay, so good questions. So on the first one, the County Department of Health, at this point, I don't see the County Department of Health shutting the school down. I do see the County Department of Health having discussions with superintendents and assisting with the decision you guys, as a local education authority, make. Because you guys have that decision now. You guys could say we're not going back to school in the fall, or you could say we're going back full time. What Governor Wolf said last week, the Department of Education, in consultation with the State Department of Health, will monitor cases across the Commonwealth, and they will, if they deem appropriate, shut school districts down. Okay? Again, I don't know what that metric is. We haven't been told what that metric is. But I do think it's possible that there would be a state entity calling a district in Erie, if numbers are real high, saying you got to close your doors for a week, 2 weeks, whatever that might be. But again, we don't know what that metric is. Now, in terms of the contact tracing, so I'm going to kind of dissect that a little bit. I can tell you the current contact tracers we have at the health department have done a ton of contact tracing, and I'm talking more than you can imagine, thousands. It's not going to be fundamentally different because it's in a school, because we've had businesses with an exposure. So we do have to conduct the contact tracing for everybody involved with that business, but that extends to each employee's home as well. So they're going to treat that the same way within a school district. If student A is positive, they're going to look at all that information within the school. They're going to identify all those people within the school with the district's help. But then they're also going to be talking to the families. Then the families, we're going to decide, did they go to a birthday party at Waldemere last week? Who did they have in contact then? Who were they 6 feet, 15 minutes or more? And so that is happening now, and it has been since the beginning. So there's not a huge difference between a school and the general public. It is, you are exactly right though. It definitely increases numbers, and that makes it more challenging.
Okay, Sumner had another question, and then I think Darlene did, but I please urge you to allow us to consider the perspective of some other people that are on today's agenda. So please keep your questions and comments focused on the health department's aspect of this. Sumner?
Yes. Getting back to the ventilation issues we have and the way this transmits through the air, at the current time, because that's such a serious problem, the state has limited gatherings inside to 25. In any of our buildings, we're going to have several hundred to 1,000 people. How do you reconcile those two aspects. It's 25, and there's at the same time saying, yes, we think you ought to consider opening the schools. It doesn't make sense to me.
Is directly related to the extracurriculars and stuff like that. So in terms of that 25, that number 25, you would want to try to keep those classrooms or that congregation of kids below the 25. Now, the 250, there isn't a school district here that can open and limit to 250 within the building.
Yes,
I don't know if there's any
ventilation system. Isn't everybody at risk?
Possibly. I'm not a ventilation expert. There are some studies and some information out there. I think, Mr. Polito, did you get the stuff that Rick Scaletta sent out? So I would defer to a ventilation expert on that. I've seen both. I'm not an expert on the size of droplets, how far they move or flow, and I'm not also sure the virility of that droplet here as opposed to 80 feet away in another building. You know what I mean? But that's also another good one for Shar on the 29th.
Thank you.
Yep.
Darlene, was I correct?
Yes, John, and I will be very quick. Final question, Mr. McEnroe.
Yep.
So right now in our plan, we have one person, God bless you, Neil Brockman, who is going to be trained on contact tracing. With a school district of 11,800 students, do you think it would be prudent for us to have more other employees also be trained, such as nurses or executive secretaries, on contact tracing?
Before you answer that, John, I'd just like to chime in. I talked to Angie yesterday. We are going to send some nurses to that training as well.
Okay. Can you give me a round? I mean, you probably can't, but what do you think our capacity is?
You're asking Brian, darling?
John, if he had an idea with that high of a population, just based upon what you have been doing in the county health department, with a population of 250,000 people living in Erie County, it seems that you've been able to do that.
Yeah, I'm conferring with Chelsea real quick. I want to say we're at 18.
Yeah, but they don't work every day.
Yeah, so I think we have 18 contact tracers right now, but they are on staggered schedules.
Okay.
So I'd be guessing.
Yeah, and I just want to say that doesn't mean that they don't get overwhelmed at times. So we definitely would have more if we could. There are times that we don't need all of those, but there are times that we have a certain number on and we have to call in more because, for example, we had someone the other day who ended up having 50 close contacts, and so we had to pull people in just for one confirmed case. So it really varies. But yeah, even though we have 18, it doesn't mean that we don't have other epidemiological staff that come in and work, and so it really depends.
And I would add on, so as I explained our goal or our concept for contact tracing, I think whoever you have trained, they're going to be an invaluable asset to the health department when we start that contact tracing piece. They're just going to be a big help. If we get to a point where we're seeing overwhelming numbers and cases skyrocket within districts, they're going to be essential.
Thank you, Mr. McEnroe and Chelsea, for your time today and your good efforts to work with us and stay partners with us in this effort. And we salute the work you do, and certainly will be in together working through this in the coming weeks.
Yep. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the perspective of the Blue Coats on the reopening. Brother Daryl Craig from the Blue Coats is with us still, I hope, and he has been an ally of ours, and he has a perspective to offer us today. Craig, are you there?
Hey, I was on mute. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
How's everybody? Before I say anything, let me preface what I'm about to say with how really impressed I am about the level of concern that you all have for our students and our families, the different perspectives There's been some great things that I just learned just sitting in this ride. We got a couple blue coats on the line who have perspective they would like to offer as well. But I will say that I'm enriched by this experience that now when we're asked because of our relationship with the district, we often field a lot of questions. I am able to say 100% that the board is being very meticulous and that from everybody that I've heard speak, they're 100% concerned with our families. And I as a parent and a partner, truly appreciate that. Now, as it pertains to our perspective, we have perspective that's kind of all over the place because we hear from a lot of people. And for just as many people as we have heard that are saying, I am not sending my child back to school, there are those who are out here that are willing to send their child back to school. And my biggest concern is, have we heard enough? I think Angela brought that up. Have we heard enough from the families? Do the families get an opportunity to weigh in on this? I like the idea of the survey to kind of get a ballpark feel on how many people would be returning. I can tell you right now that we have some students that are not coming back, and it has nothing to do with the virus. It has everything to do that they were uprooted near the end of the year, and they were out of school so long that they have been totally captured by the streets. And it's breaking my heart because these kids will never come back. It has nothing to do with the virus. And I can see the impact that not being in school is, and it's a dangerous thing. We have so many questions, but not being in school for some is just as dangerous as being in school, is what I'm trying to say. Some of these kids will never be told put a mask on unless they're in school. They will never be reminded to social distance unless they're somewhere where people are preaching that 24/7. And so I don't envy you guys because this is a serious matter and it has so many questions and so many dynamics to it. But I do know that there are a lot of families that are waiting and holding their breath, hoping to hear that the schools are going to open back up. And for different reasons. For different reasons. And so when we look at this scenario, have we heard enough from the family themselves? I know we don't want to just put all the pressure on them to make the choice. I get that. I don't even know where I'm at as a father and sending my 10-year-old. But I do know that we could not hurt ourselves and it would serve us better if we were hearing from the family themselves. And that's my perspective.
Daryl, how familiar are you with the plan? I mean, the county health department person said that flexibility is desirable, and some of us interpret this plan that the superintendent has as flexibility. Are you familiar with it?
When I heard about that plan, I felt it was a home run because of the options and the choice factor. And that the fact that everybody would feel as if though they were included in the decision making process. As you know, we've been kind of leading the charge here in the 16503 area, although we started immediately after the pandemic was announced at going out and stressing the fact of following the safety protocol. And so we've been out here and we're getting ready to make another great push into the 16503. But I know that a lot of the people we have talked to, I have talked to them about the fact that they're going to have a choice. That has been my response to the many questions. Well, you'll have a choice. It seems to me that they're putting forth a plan that will give you a choice. So I am familiar with the that plan.
Well, some of us are interpreting
where they can go to school or not, or either they can choose to do partial.
Well, some of us see this document that's been prepared over the last few months by our administration as a framework for us to determine what it is that parents want and then decide what direction we're going to go and how far in one direction or not at all or to whatever degree. I just want to chime in with, I'm not sure that anybody's advocating, nor is it realistic to expect that any building is going to be fully occupied 5 days a week all day long. I think we're just trying to find a way to accommodate those that can and want to. And I want to, while I have the floor, I just want to say, I see kids on street corners mingling and playing in close proximity, and let's not kid ourselves that they're safe and isolating and wearing masks. And if we put them in school, they're going to be harmed by further by the close proximity. They're doing it anyway, so let's not ignore that. That's not a strong point to do anything one way or another, but we're all pointing out some of the realities we see and know and hear of. Daryl, did you want any of the other blue coats to weigh in?
I know that, I don't know if Brother Dave is on live. Dave Aaron, who is actually our middle school football coach, who deals a lot with the Wilson School. I don't know if he's on, but we also have Brother Craig, who deals a lot with East Middle School and Edison, and I know he's doing a lot of stuff with the community school down there. Well, at least he's attending, frequent attendee of their meetings and sharing the information that they're putting out. I don't know if he has a perspective that he wants to offer in that. I do actually.
Go ahead.
A lot of the children, as Brother Daryl said, aren't coming back to school. But if we can look at the parents and determine which parents work, that's a lot of the things that we hear when we're in the community is that I have a job, I have to work, and their job is determined on their child care, and a lot of parents use the school for that purpose and work during those hours, and because those are the only hours available to them because of their children. A lot of them, if we did a poll as to how many of them work during those hours and how many of them would actually need their children to be in school, as opposed to those that don't and can utilize the homeschooling aspect of the computers, that would be a big help as so that we won't be wondering like we're going to have overrun schools once they open, because I don't think that's going to be the case.
Well, everyone, we have several items to get to, but Daryl, would you be open to accepting any questions right now from any board members should they have them? Before I ask them, I ask you if you want to see.
I don't mind answering questions.
All right. Are there any board members who have any questions for Brother D or David?
Mr. President.
There you go.
So, Brother D, if you had young children in school, would you send your children to school?
And that's where I just said I'm on the fence at. I have a 10-year-old, but what I would want to do is go to that school and look. I want you to show me what your plan is. Okay? Because my child is out here now. And she's having certain interactions that can't be avoided. You know what I mean? It's not like we're locking her in the house. Okay? It's not like we're able to even monitor if she goes outside every second of the day. And I know that she's starving and craving that social interaction. I know how important that is to these kids. So it's a tough decision. But I like the fact that I have the choice, and that's what I'm saying. I like the fact that I have some say-so in whether or not she goes back. My wife and I right now, we're deeply in prayer about this situation. But we have been telling people that they will have a choice. And I guess that's what I'm afraid of, that the choice factor is being minimized here. And that's a powerful thing. You have people that are not going to send their kids, but they still want the choice. They still want to know that they have some input, if that answers your question.
Mr. President, Brother D, I appreciate your comments because they kind of in line with some of the ways that I'm thinking. I know that me personally, I was one of the people that was most scared of COVID when it first came. But like the man from the health department said, with the proper procedures and if you're following the guidelines, typically things will work out, for the good for you. But my question is, with you being in the buildings, what kind of safety precautions, and I know you're not an expert, but I know you're in our buildings, with us telling, people that, the kids need to wear masks and all this type of stuff. Like, what kind of things do you think, particularly for the high school, because the littler kids seem to wear their mask and follow the rules a little bit better, from my experience, for me reopening. My question would be, what kind of precautions do you think would be best, in the high schools? Like, what do you think you need to see? Hand sanitizing pumps? Do we offer masks? What kind of things do you think would be helpful in the high school buildings that you are in? What kind of things that you want to see, even as a parent sending your child back to school?
I would definitely want to see the ventilation system, make sure that it's enough air, enough space. I'm definitely looking for that, Angela. I think the hand sanitizer pumps throughout the building, in the classroom, are a must have. And I would love to see that there is a no nonsense approach to enforcing the protocol in those buildings. I would not shy away from using the gym and any wide open space that we have as a possible classroom setting. You may be able to get 2 classes in a gym, depending on how big it is. I know they were using those fans during the graduation. That's the only reason why I really even approved of going to the graduation, because of the way they used the fans, the way they used the space. And I think it worked out very well for them. And so I would definitely want to see all of the above: hand sanitizer, social distancing, as much open air areas being utilized as possible, and that adamant, no nonsense approach to following the protocols in our buildings.
Lori, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. So, Mr. Darrell and Craig, we totally thank you for being on the call. Thank you for everything that you do. Because I always see you at McKinley, so I appreciate all of what you guys do in your presence, in the community, in your relationships. So I have like a question, and like I talked with, a few of the board members or whatnot, but I think that the questions, from the other day on the call, I don't want to say like misconstrue questioning with, our total rejection. I just think that the parents deserve to hear a lot of conversation so that they can make a really clear, thought out, decision on what to do with their kids next. And I think that is really, really important for the community to have heard all of that, right? Because they need to have some real meat, to make decisions off of. And like you said, you're still trying to decide as well. And I'm all, I guess I'm trying to figure out. So you guys do the walking school bus, so for what on your end, what is that now going to look like with, clustering the kids with walking, I posed that question yesterday, when I was at one of the schools, just because that's going to be something we have to think about, because we can't eliminate the walking school bus because you guys have invested so much work into getting that. And it is helpful. And we do want the kids to have a safe, a safe walk to school, and however that happens. So I wanted to ask you guys that. I did go to 3 of the schools yesterday, and I will say, when I went to Deal, the principal wasn't there, which, I was actually really glad about, because I wanted somebody else to walk me through, and I didn't have to feel like I'm dealing with any, no offense, I don't think you guys coached anybody, but I felt like a lot of things were staged. So it was great to have the engineer walk me through Deal. And honestly, Deal probably gave me the most peace, of all the buildings, probably because they were already set, but just asking, just wondering, what do you think about the walking school bus? How is that going to, change? Have you guys had a chance to think about how that is going to change? And also, as far as like your just asking to a parent now, right? So this next question is you as a parent. First question was you with Blue Coat. Now I'm asking you as a parent to a kid in the public schools. Would you feel comfortable knowing if your kid was in a school that that has a limited amount of students, like kind of like how Walmart, only lets a capped amount in. I'm not saying we cap them on the day of, but once we get all the numbers in and all of that, I feel like that would create a little bit more peace for families to know that, okay, if I send my kid to school tomorrow, it's not going to be all 1,800 kids at Erie High, right? They have already had the registration happen. They have already taken in the number and the counts. Would that give you more peace with where your daughter would be, as opposed to on any given day, any amount of students can show up? Because the reality is, if this information hasn't been sent, or the new American population hasn't heard this and it hasn't been translated into their language, they are going to show up 100% on the first day, right? Our ELL population, if they don't know what's happening, right? They're not hearing all of this. They're not reading all of this if it hasn't been put out in their language and whatnot. So we can pretty much count on them, which isn't bad at all. It's just, I'm just looking at from a number standpoint. And I think that a lot of our questions arose from just looking for some logistics on things. So my one question to you was really, about the walk-in school bus. And the other question is, as a parent, would you feel more comfortable if you knew that things were a little bit more contained with options, but they would have to be somewhat contained and managed, if that makes sense, what I'm saying.
You make some very good, strong points. I'll address the walking school bus. I think the walking school bus for us is going to be relatively easy. And one of the things we already resigned to, in order to make it work in the first place, we have to make it kind of like fun for the kids. And so I know that in order for us to do that, we have to engage the kids. But I believe that kids who show up together will be allowed to walk together. If a parent brings a group of kids and drop the kids off at Seraphin's, okay, we'll give that group a head start, and let them get on their way, because you got eyes on these kids at all times, according to the way we have it worked out. And so the next arrivals will be set forth at a different pace, and we'll always have somebody in close enough proximity to tell them no running, no, you can't catch up, you got to stay right there. You know what I mean? But I think that'll be a lot easier on the way to school, especially when I think about McKinley and the way we have it mapped out, because you're coming from basically from Seraphin's down to I think it's 22nd or 23rd, and 22nd, and then over 22nd to McKinley. And so we got enough eyes on them, enough voices that we can space them out and get them there without grouping up, and enough voices and enough eyes to intervene if that starts to happen, if that makes sense, if you can visualize that. Then far as my child coming to school, I'm also a minister, a preacher of the gospel. And when the churches, we shut down at our church for a while, but when we opened back up, it was kind of tough getting people to come back in, even with the social distancing and the protocol we had in place. And I remember having a thought that if you can go to Walmart, if you can go to Country Fair, you can definitely show up at church. And that was my thought process. So if my daughter has and does continue to go to Walmart with us, and I would feel that she's a whole lot safer in one of our schools than she is in Walmart. I'll guarantee you that. She's a whole lot safer in one of our schools than she is at the corner store. You know what I mean? And I've seen them relax and go to sleep on the job, and I've seen how difficult it is for them to make sure every customer in there is keeping that mask up, and then with people touching and all that, it's just way too much difficult area to try to contain. I believe we have more control in the schools, definitely more control in the schools, and with the populations with the thought that, well, no, we're not going to see 1,800 students showing up. But I definitely agree with that part about our immigrant population, us needing to get out ahead of opening and make sure that they get the information translated in their language and that they understand that, first of all, they don't have to come. And if they do come, this is the way they have to come. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was good. I just wanted to kind of get your take on it. And I mean, Brian and John, I don't know if this is something for you guys, but I guess the question would be like, was International Institute, MCRC, were they involved in this? And I don't know if this is a question you want to answer now. I don't know if this is something you want to wait till later.
Nope, I can answer that now.
Okay.
We intend to translate it into, I believe, our 6 biggest languages. We have not done that yet because you haven't approved the plan. The idea here was that once we had the plan approved, that Ken Nixon would take the lead on outreach and student engagement. He'd be working with Daryl and the Blue Coats and our other community partners to really get out there, just like we did in the spring, and knock on doors and reach out to those families to make sure that they have that information and they understand exactly what things are going to look like in the fall.
That's great. Can we have international, since they have those, since they are already linked with some of our students, are we going to make sure that they're linked to kind of help because they already have the, okay.
They're one of our partners. And then the other thing that we were working with, Erica has been talking to Erie Insurance. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Erica, the translation.
Sure. Erie Insurance has basically just a telephone line where families can get, because we know some of the families struggle with reading even in their native language. So we want to provide all sorts of options. So a telephone line where families could call for translated information is also a possibility. So Erie Insurance has that. We're in the process of reaching out to see if we're able to connect with them. Any plan that we also distribute to families, there's a kind of a section in there that says in our top 5 or 6 languages, it says in those languages that translations are available, language assistance is available.
Cool. Can we do an all call if Erie Insurance is creating that, is there any way we can do an all call out from the district to all, how we do if school is canceled or something abrupt happens? Is that an option, or is it strictly for if parents call and then they can get the answer that way?
So that's part of what we're investigating right now, trying to create different groups within the one call system based on the prevalent or chosen language in that home, so that we can either with the help of Erie Insurance or through another method, just recording those translated instructions or messages, and then having them sent out directly to families that have indicated another language other than English. We could probably do that for our top most prevalent languages, and that's what we're investigating right now.
Okay. I don't have any more questions.
Mr. President.
Tyler.
My question, I guess, I think it'll be a combination of Blue Coats weighing in as well as, Brian on this one. What we know about trauma and what trauma does to the brain is, especially with young people, is it equips them to act out in ways or in the language that they can speak. That's often behavior. And what we know is that our students have witnessed, or first off, they were disrupted within school last year, and then they've witnessed a lot of murders of black and brown bodies, and they've witnessed protests and they've witnessed uprising. This is shifting our communities. They witnessed police brutality here in Erie, and they're going to be coming back into school with not having been able to process this. Many of them and until they come into like back in. And this might be some of the first times that they've been able to sit down, and then white students and black students are going to be processing this together, and that's going to further put our black students and brown students in an uncomfortable and potentially trauma inducing situation. And so I want us to be prepared for when we come back in and we have these plans in place. These are in ideal situations, and what are we going to do to help assure that kids who are acting out the hurt and that of course they feel, and we support the teachers who are now going to be, how do they enforce wearing these masks, how do they enforce that 6 feet, how do they, what is our plan there with this new layer of complex trauma that's going to be entering our district this August, September.
Well, Tyler, we haven't worked out all the details on things like that. I know we've had a lot of discussions about it. Certainly that's going to fall with Angie Kanaki and her team to pull all that together. But you do make a good point, and I will make sure to add that to our list so that we do address it between now and the start of school.
D?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, one of the things, I'm glad you asked that question. One of the things we had discussed with Brian, taking into account all of those factors, the trauma, the baggage our kids, for lack of a better term, might be bringing back to school, that we might create an acclimation period to get the kids back into school, that we wouldn't have, that we would anticipate a certain amount of time being spent on reacquainting our children with the atmosphere and the expectation, especially with it being a lot different from before, that we wouldn't just rush them right back in, but we would ease them back in. One of the things being that everybody in the building would do their able-bodied best to convey to the children how concerned they are and how happy they are that the children are back, and just kind of spend some time building them up into. I don't know what that looks like, how long it looks like, but I do believe that it's 100% necessary. And I have a question to go along with that. As I how concerned or how did the information about the 16503 area impact you all's thinking? And any point you can feel a board member or a staff member, feel free to answer that. I just would like to know what's your general feeling district-wide about the news about the 16503 and how it may have impacted you all's thought process.
Mr. President, I'll speak to that. Mr. Craig, my big concern here is with the district having 60% African American and Hispanic students, and with the poor outcomes that African Americans and Hispanics have had with the COVID, they're 4 or 5 times more likely to be hospitalized and die. That is why I've been making the stand I've been making, which is let these other schools open in the county. They're primarily white. They're less susceptible to it than our students are. We already appear to be the hot spot. Now that's by zip code. I don't know the boundaries of 16503. It probably goes outside the city, but we probably are the hot spot because we're the most densely populated area. So that is why I think we should be cautious, very cautious here, because when we send something out to the public, they're going to think that we've done our best to be as safe as possible. And we've been trying, everybody's trying. But for example, this huge issue of ventilation, we don't even have a report on that till the 14th of August. That's why I have recommended that we open on a distance learning for 1 month. Let's see how this works for the rest of the county. I was not comforted by what I heard from the health department. They're dealing with this for the first time as well. Everybody is. I don't know why we aren't getting more guidance from the governor, from the county executive on that. They're pushing it down to us school boards. None of us are qualified to be working on this. We're all struggling with it. And I'm very aware that we have a hotspot in the 16503, but I think the whole city is a hotspot. And that's why I'm favoring a cautious approach. Thank you.
Mr. President, and I raised my hand. So, my in response to Brother Darrell. So that's one reason why last meeting my feelings were so strong, and I advocated so strongly not to approve a plan, not because I felt like we and I don't want to backtrack, but no, we didn't fully read and understand the plan, but I knew there was parts of the plan that was not, just by the discussion that we were having, I knew it wasn't all the way complete. And it was no offense to the administration on the work that they've done. We appreciate the work that they've done, but it's not about like not to be dismissive or anything, but if the plan's not meaty enough, or if it doesn't have enough information, and if it's not in particular enough for what we expect for our schools to reopen, then I'm sorry, I'm not going to approve it, because I need to see more. And that's not out of a disrespectful, that's not a disrespectful tone, that's out of a concerned tone for exactly what you're talking about, because we are the ones that are going to be affected the most. I'm Black and I live in it. My daycare is in it. I live in these neighborhoods. I'm Black. I can speak for myself. And I can say, and I can speak for my community, because it's me that you all are talking about. I appreciate the concern from the people that are not Black, but as a Black woman who has a business in 16503, I have family members who live in 16503, and my brother lives right down the way, as we call it, but right on East 6th Street. And we all my whole family lives in the city. None of us lives in Mill Creek. We all live on the east side. My brother lives right in the hood on 23rd Street. I can speak for me because I've done my research, and I know, because I'm Black and I have all different nationalities that attend my facility, and I'm going to speak for myself because I can speak out of experience that the concern of how many COVID cases are in the city does weigh on me heavy, which is why I need to see a plan in place where I'm seeing things like hygiene stations. I need to see exactly how the day is going to look. I need to know there's not going to be more than a certain amount of kids in the school, whether CDC guidelines says so or not. It doesn't matter to me. Our school district guidelines should say so. It doesn't. If CDC says, "Oh, you can have 20 kids in the school," the school district doesn't have to accept that. We can still have 10 kids in a classroom. So to answer your question, Brother Darrell, that's exactly why I would not go along with the plan last week, because it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough specific guidelines to protect us, those who don't have health care, those who don't have access to health care, those who go to the hospital and don't come home when we're looking nationally, those who can't even go, if they do go to hospital, some of them can't even go get their medicine or pay for it to get it picked up. So that's exactly why I'm so concerned. That's exactly why I feel so strongly about having a solid plan that has very specific things involved, including the tracking, including the sanitation guidelines, including the check-ins, who's going to check in, who at the door, including the class size limitations, and safety limitations. So that is my direct concern, but I'm not only just concerned about the African American community. I am very concerned. That is my priority, but I'm concerned about all the students. Okay. And COVID affects the Black community more. Yes, I'm acknowledging that, but any of these people that walk in these buildings can get COVID. How about that? So not only am I just going to address one population, I want to address every student that walks into this building, and every teacher that walks into this building, every staff that walks into this building, and make sure that everybody is walking into the most
safe environment that they can walk into. I want our bus drivers to be driving the bus in the safest possible environment that they could be in. Our custodial staff to be cleaning these buildings in the safest environment that could be. I know that it's going to affect us more. I know that it's going to raise our numbers in the city more if our students walk in here knowing that we already live in hotspots. But I don't want to see nobody take that road of COVID because we do not have the proper things in place in our schools. And I feel like we have the capability to come up with a plan that will protect 16503, African Americans, new Americans, white Americans, whoever walks through these doors, the staff and everything else. There's a lot of anxiety that is occurring behind this issue. And I know there's been a lot of thought put into these plans, but there needs to be some more thought put into these plans. And although I do encourage in-person instruction, such as Brother Darrell said, and I told Brian on the phone, we do need some in-person instruction. There's some kids that are really struggling out here. You know what? They might not have opened their Chromebook, but some of them didn't even know how to open a Chromebook, do not know how to operate a computer, do not have parents that speak English or things like that. So there's a lot of, to say, they didn't open their Chromebooks or they don't, this, that, or the third. Like Brother Darrell said, some of them we lost. They're not going to come back to school, period, because the streets got them. And then some of them really don't have the capability to teach their children or even understand what online schooling is. So I do feel like there should be, some safe in-person learning. But if it comes down to it and our plans are not solid enough, yes, I'm going to go with the online. But I need to see something that's going to protect the African American students and all staff as well. So that, yes, to answer your question, Brother Darrell, that is a priority of mine. But the people that have to be in these buildings all day, they're all a priority to me.
Absolutely. And let me clarify my question, and I hope you guys don't mind me jumping in front of anybody. But my question comes from here, Angie. We are so concerned, as you know, we already made one push out and we're going out again. This time we're trying to take 150 volunteers with us because we do know those are our people. All of my grandchildren that live in the city of Erie live in 16503. Right up on 24th and Perry. And so I'm just like you, I am concerned. But here's why I wanted to bring 16503 back up. And I want you all to think with me for a minute. I'm out there every day. If Brother Craig is still on the line, he can attest to it. He's out there every day. We're asking these young people, why aren't you wearing masks, right? Why aren't you following the protocol? And you know what they told us the other day, and it never even dawned on me, Angie? What we were told was this. They say it's 16503, but think about it. I don't know nobody who has it. I'm saying this, that we need more information on where they made the determination, how they made the determination that it was us in the 16503 area, zip code. Because I'm out there every day, and you would have thought that I would have heard by now a friend of mine, a family member of mine that knew somebody that was a part of this 36% statistic. And nobody's seeing it. So I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned with how we're viewed throughout this whole issue with the virus, how we're treated, how we're served. I'm very concerned on every level, and I'm talking as a black man now.
Mr. Harkin.
As a black man, we ain't trying to be nobody's guinea pigs or nobody's experiment either.
Right.
Mr. Harkin.
And I respect that because you can speak you can't nobody speak for us like we can speak for ourselves. And I respect that, Brother Darrell, and you're absolutely right.
Mr. Harkins, let us not forget, I live in 16503 area code as well, but it's not only us. We live in a diverse neighborhood. 16503, 16510. We have people that come from all over in those areas. Yes, there is a large number of us of African American descent. That is true. But right now, I'm hearing what you're saying, but are we focusing on trying to how to reopen the plan? Are we trying to get the questions in so the families can have a positive outlook on what it is that they would like to do? Are we going to try to reach the community as a whole? Share the information with them so positive decisions can be made on how we're going to reopen.
Absolutely, Sister Gwen. I just wonder if everybody is perceiving their fear is coming from the fact that they think it's us. That's the only reason I raised that question. When you say 16503, there's not just African Americans in 16503. Maybe predominant, but if your fear is based on the fact that your school is in the 16503 and you deal with a high majority of African American students, and that your fear of being in that building is based upon the number of African Americans that come in that building, is it accurate? That's all I'm asking. So we need to know how they got the 16503 numbers. That's all I'm saying. Where's the evidence? I don't see the overwhelming evidence out here. I'm standing out here right now. I have people who live out here, live in these neighborhoods, are asking the same question. Who are these people?
Well, the answer could be this. We have a lot of people who are not responding, who are not telling you that they may have it. I know of some people who live in the 16503 who have contracted the virus, who have died from the virus. And I know that because I know them personally. But people as a whole may not know that. So people in the 16503, yes, we are contracting it. The other day, a young man in Fairview, a student athlete, has contracted the virus. So it's there. So I would like for us to know that the virus is out there in everyone's neighborhood. We need to be focusing on what we're doing for the city of Erie, 12,000 students, and how we're going to better communicate with the parents on helping them to make a positive decision on getting their children back in school. I went out and I visited the schools. I looked at some of the classrooms. Yes, they are preparing themselves to be ready to receive. But we do need to know the numbers so we can have a cap on it. Because we have to be prepared to deal with the students when they come in. We have to stop and think about, do we have enough aides? Because we just can't be tempting them when they get to school. We need to tempt them before they get on a bus. Don't give them an opportunity to get on the bus to infect other students. We have to look at all this right now. We can't keep talking about our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods, yes, but we need to look at and be serious about the plan of reopening our schools. Bus drivers, do we have enough bus drivers? Do we have enough aides? There's such things as the waterless hand soap. It doesn't have to be the hand sanitizer. There's a waterless hand soap. We need to focus and concentrate because time is of an essence here. We need to get this information out to parents so they can make a valid decision. This is the plan. We need your input. I disagree with the numbers. We have 12,000 students, 2,000 parents. That's not a good representation. We need to find a better way to reach out to the parents so they can give us their feedback. 2,000 parents on that survey out of 12,000, I'm sorry. I don't like that. So we must focus on how we can get the community, the parents, get the numbers to help us make a valid decision on how to bring the students back.
Mr. President?
We're mobilized and ready to help you guys in any way possible as usual, but I just thought it was pertinent that we address 16503 to some length. Other than that, you're absolutely right. We need to be back to focusing on, and I'm sorry if I caused anybody to digress. That's not my intent. I want our schools to open back up, but more than anything, I want our people to be safe. All people. When I say our people, I mean all people.
Mr. President?
Lori.
Yeah. So, I mean, Mr. Darrell, so the reason why I brought up 16503 is because I work in that school. And so I was on a school meeting when we discussed those numbers, right? So I will say one thing for sure, I've said since the beginning of the coronavirus is that it has exposed everything. That's what it did, right? it exposed the gaps in our government. It exposed all the the gaps in our systems, right? Not just systemic gaps, because those have been there, but even gaps in our planning, right? Like, we never had a plan for a pandemic because we never were thinking that it was going to happen, right? And on top of all of that, there might have been promises that were made, like, oh yeah, we're totally covered on this. And when the pandemic hit, it's like the exposure happened of, well, we weren't really covered on that. We were covered, but only for a small percentage. And I say all of that because on the flip side, right, when I think about where our school will be in the 16503 zip code, right, if a class once had 28, right, classes were never supposed to be jam packed, right? We have hollered for years about that. And the good side, and this is one, don't get too happy, but this is one good side of this, is that now we are forced to have class sizes that were intentional from the beginning, right? You were never supposed to have 28 kids, right? That's an overcrowded classroom. All the statistics show that it's hard for kids to learn. It's hard for teachers to teach in overcrowded rooms. And now we have, unfortunately, an opportunity to utilize a classroom with numbers like 10, numbers like 12, so kids can really get the individual attention that they need. It might not be a teacher standing over their shoulder, but it will be way more realistic for that one-on-one interaction, right? So in some instances, I can look at that, and that's just from, I'm in the building all day, right? And I will be in the building all day when the school year starts. I've already told some of the teachers, irregardless of what the plan is, just know I'll be there walking with you. So it's not like I'm not sitting somewhere else and telling you how it's going to go. I'm going to actually have some skin in the game, So I think that my focus for 16503 was not to like create any kind of uproar. I'm focused on it because I'm working in it, and I just want to make sure we're being advised as to how things are going to now change for that zip code, and what kind of measures can we look at taking so that kids in that zip code, right? When I say kids in that school, I mean all the kids, right? I didn't point anyone out. I mean every single student, because that is a very diverse community. So I'm just looking from an aspect, and my whole point is, how are we just making sure that the kids will be safe and that we're not putting them in a petri dish, for lack of a better word, and overcrowding spaces by saying we can fit everybody safely. Well, there's some reality to that. There's some safety reality that I just think we need to kind of really be mindful of when we're just like open it up to everybody, as opposed to putting some caps on things, especially if the numbers are higher, right? Like, and if we need to, I'm sure somebody can look into getting those. Well, he already said the zip codes, they're not going to narrow it down to the block. They're not going to narrow it down to the street. But he was just talking about the zone wise. When we were just talking earlier with the guy from the health department. But I just wanted to say, like, yeah, I put that out there because, I'm in the building, and I just was thinking and reading things, and I'm the one good part, and it's not great because it still creates a stress. There's still a stress on teachers. There's still a stress on parents as to their kid being safe. But then there's the reality of your kid will actually be in a classroom size that was supposed to be all along, which was never 28, which was never 30. It was always supposed to be 15 and under, right? So we had overcrowded classrooms, and now we're at a mandated place where those classrooms everyone's going to have to pull back, right? So we can't crowd. But my real big concern is that, and I told Brian on the phone, is that we don't, like you said, at Walmart, they're growing really lax. And that was my same example to Brian, was Walmart went from wiping down your carts for you, won't let you in without a mask. And now if you go, they're barely wiping down the carts and you can get in without a mask, right? And I just want to make sure that even on the admin side, on the teacher side, and even on our side, we don't grow lax, right, in that, especially in certain schools in our community. Mainly, my concern is our inner city ones, and at Erie High, where it's huge. I mean, we were in there yesterday, and Rose, you said, like, oh, I got to get this mask off, because you couldn't breathe. The kids are going to be in there for 7 hours with it. We were just there for what? Walking through, barely able to breathe. So there's some realities that we have to really, really sift through with all of this. But I believe our kids need to be seen, right? There's a whole lot of kids that, we haven't heard from or seen since March. And my heart is really, really concerned about those students, right? And so I know we have to do it. I just want to make sure that we are covered on all kind of safety sides, and after going to a few of the schools yesterday, I mean, honestly, I'd like to see them all. But, yesterday I dealt with the reality of, seeing 3. And like I said, Deal gave me a sense of comfort. It's not to say that McKinley didn't. I'm not saying Erie High didn't. I'm just saying because Deal was just amazing. And that was without a principal giving me a flowered approach,
Mr. President?
Are you still with us? Brother D, are you still with us?
He is still signed in.
Tom, did you have a question?
I'm here.
Well, no, I'm just wondering, how is the flow of the rest of this meeting going before I start asking questions?
At some point, we get to discuss what we're calling the plan and the health and safety concerns of it. I hope we get to do that as a board. But we've had these perspectives from the health department and the Blue Coats to hear first. And I was hoping later on we would have an executive session to deal with several pending items that have been hanging for weeks now. So that's why I keep pushing everybody to bring their thoughts into focus and so at some point get beyond expressing how much concern we have and I proceed from the assumption that we're all concerned, and I don't know anybody that isn't, but we need to get to the point where we start making a decision, and decision is not once and for all and final. It just sets an outline in motion that addresses what I think I heard Lori and Gwen say they want to see us do, and I think this is an outline to take us through that. So,
Mr. President. Yes, unless there's any other questions for our brother D, we do have some options for the board to consider and discuss as far as what school looks like next year.
Okay, does that shape you still have a question, Tom, or not?
Well, I have a couple of suggestions as well, but I'll certainly wait and hear from Mr. Polito and see how that plays out. I don't want to.
That would be next.
Out of time.
That would be next, Tom, but we want to make sure everybody's questions for Brother D have been asked or answered.
Mr. President?
Darlene.
Yeah, Brother D, I have heard from the community, and it would be great if we could collaborate with you in helping us reach some of the families that have been unable to or unaware to fill out the surveys yet. So I have a feeling you guys have already been talking about that.
Absolutely. That, like I said, that's what we're here for. We're here to help the community and whenever we can bridge whatever gap there is. And once again, let me apologize. I definitely didn't mean to. I'm not used to sitting in on these sessions, so maybe my emotions got into it. That's not my intent, because I do and
You don't have to apologize, Mr. Craig. You didn't do anything you need to apologize for.
So know that I appreciate the hard work you do, and I appreciate the gravity of your decision making more than anything. And I will tell anybody that our board is definitely hard at work, as well as our administration, that you all are hard at work and all are trying with everything to make the right sound decision. And so with that being said, we're here to help. Whatever you need from us, contact us. We'll figure it out. If you need us to get the information out, get it together, we'll get it out there. We do have that big push coming up, and I'll get a date for you guys where we're going to flood the 16503 area in particular. So that'll be a great opportunity too, to get out information.
Well, thank you, Daryl, for all that you've always done, and particularly at this moment, it's crucial and appreciated by us too. On our end.
All right, guys. Thank you for having me. I'm signing out if that's it.
I'll take it easy.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Blue Coats. I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent in a second, but I just want to say this is good work. It's the product of much thought and months of effort by thoughtful, caring, capable staff members and people in the community, including us. We have been in on it. And we, as I said, we all have concerns, but to approve this does not lock us into an irreversible policy that can't be touched, completely abandoned. It just sets in motion an outline to proceed through and from. And there'll be many hands on the plug. We have our own mechanism to reconsider any motion we ever approve, to bring it back up and undo it or modify it. And the governor's hand will be on the plug, and the State Department of Education's hand will be on the plug. And then a majority of us can, and by the way, I believe the superintendent is a caring person, and he's not going to allow anything to get away from us or out of hand or put students, families, and teachers in danger. So I want to appeal to everyone that this is not the final irreversible moment of truth where we have to decide where we stand on all of these national emotional news stories that drive everybody and upset everybody. We have to wade through all of this and decide something for the sake of the community. So I get emotional too. We all do. That's my part. I'll turn it over to the superintendent because we have it here as reopening plan options as he has listed it. Mr. Polito.
Thank you. Before we get into the options, I touched on this last week, but I just again wanted to share with the board the amount of stakeholder participation that was put into the plan that we presented to you on Monday. And I think, in talking to my colleagues in other districts, I think we had more stakeholder participation and especially teacher participation in this plan than any other district in the region. And it really did. It included 7 committees. We had 9 different individuals review the plan, and of course the stakeholder forum as well. So we did have a lot of people weigh in on this plan, and we took all that into consideration as we developed it, and wanted to make sure that we had something that was reviewed comprehensively before we brought it to you. And again, I just want to highlight that Erie County Department of Health did review it, and as John McEnroe said earlier, he felt it was a good plan and a workable plan. So, we're feeling pretty confident at this point that, we can use this as a basis. I certainly understand that not every detail item is in the plan, but, once we get the framework together, we can get down to the building level. And I shared with you today what Deal's plan looked like. And that's just an example of some of the decisions and the detailed decisions that need to be made at the building level, because every one of our buildings is different. So we can't include that type of detail in the plan because of the variations across the district. So over the last week, I've talked to a lot of you, and we've taken into consideration the concerns you raised on Monday. And really the 2 things that have stood out to me are really the number of students in the building and the number of options that we were providing families. So before we get into the health and safety plan, I think it's important that we as a board here make a decision on exactly what the student schedule is going to look like for next year, because based on that discussion and that decision, we're going to have to make changes to the health and safety plan. And I just want to point out too that we have 38 days until school is scheduled to start. And of course, we could push that back, but we are running out of time. So Teresa and I sat down and we really came up with 4 different options for you to consider. I thought it was a good basis to start. Why we chose these options was, one, that I felt like it addressed the concerns that I was hearing from the school board. And 2, all of these options really take into consideration the work that was done by the committee. So it maintains the integrity of the instructional plan that all those individuals weighed in on. So it gives us a framework to work with. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, and she's going to talk about the 4 different options.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to start with option 4, which is the 100% virtual option. That's going to be our most restrictive option for our families, and that would include remote instruction and the Cyber Choice Academy. So those would be the 2 choices. For option 3, students would attend every other day in green and yellow. In the red phase, we would have remote instruction and the Cyber Choice Academy. In yellow and green, half of the students would attend school each day on an alternating schedule. So students would be assigned to a cohort, and they would report only on the days they were assigned. So maybe on an A-B day, if I was assigned to cohort A and that was my reporting day, I would report on those days. B, I would be at home receiving remote instruction. We came up with another option out of that. That's option 2, where students do still attend every other day in green and yellow, but parents have the option to send students to school on the remote day in green only. So if we're still in the green phase, the students that would not be the cohort of students to report to school would report to an overflow space in school and receive their instruction remotely, but in our school, with shelter and food and everything else that we can provide to them, including a certified teacher to support. Option 1 is the original plan we proposed, and in the red phase, we would still, again, be in remote instruction. That's the same for all of the options. The yellow phase and the green phase are identical. We would offer family choice. So the in-school instruction, if parents wanted to send their students every day. The remote instruction, if they wanted to keep them home. The hybrid model, which is going to be a combination of both of those, and then the Cyber Choice Academy, which would be the asynchronous instruction from the Emerson Gridley site. Are there any questions about any of these options?
Board members?
And just to clarify, option 3, really, what that does is ensure that at any given time, only 50% of the students are in the building. It would be an every other day schedule. That would also address some of the concerns raised about transportation and having 2 students to a seat. This option would allow us to have 1 student per seat and to maintain that strict 6 feet of social distancing on the bus. On option 2, again, we would have the same type of approach under the yellow phase, but again, giving under the green phase parents options to come in. One of the things we could do there as far as addressing transportation is only provide transportation on the day the student is scheduled to come to school, and then the other day would be parent responsibility.
And Brian, you're talking about a full-time day, correct?
Yes.
You're talking 8 to 2:30?
Yes, we looked at the half-day schedules. Some of the other school districts are doing that, but EMCA, as our provider for middle school and high school at this point, we can't accommodate transportation with a half-day schedule.
Okay. Thanks. Mr. Polito?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, since we don't really know what, and we have to give our parents an option, and once we find out from back from the parents what their option is, we can better plan. Is it possible that if we started out in option 3 because of the overflow space, not knowing how much we were going to need, how much space we have in the buildings, but as we find that more students aren't going to be coming back to school, then we could quickly move to opening up and offering option 2 to those students so that they would be there and receive their lunch, etc. Another suggestion that was given to me yesterday was that, actually I was talking to Representative Mirsky, and he was reminding me that we do have some, depending upon what schools have the greatest need for capacity, we do have some empty school buildings. We probably would have to rent them, but we might be able to offer a safe place for our students to be able to go to on the day that they're not attending school, and still be able to receive their lunches and their some support in the instruction if we were able to turn on the Wi-Fi. But again, the only hurdle there is that we would have to check their ventilation systems as well, and it would cost us a little more money to pay rent. It was another idea.
Right.
The third idea was that because we're partnering with United Way, and they have that $2 million, perhaps they would be able to help with some childcare this year in transition and instead of maybe the plan that they were working on, to help our families with childcare on those days that the students aren't attending school, that we might be able to come up with some type of plan. Thank you.
Any other board members on these questions?
Mr. President,
When?
did I hear, was that Darlene who said that we may have to rent the buildings?
That was Darlene talking before you.
Yeah, I don't know, Gwen. I don't know if they would allow us to use their facilities without renting them or not. But
We already own those buildings, Miss Darlene.
Which ones?
We own Burton. We own Irving.
Oh, correct.
So we should have to pay no rent.
That's correct. If the ventilation studies were to come back, we wouldn't.
Okay.
Although that would, if those children are walking though, because we can't provide transportation, that would only be for the children that live in that part of the city.
Okay.
May I chime in here? We looked at using Burton and Irving. There's no way we could have those ready in time. They're just in poor condition overall, and wouldn't be a feasible option for the upcoming school year. We certainly we're going to have to consider those type of options, especially if some of our ventilation studies come back, and we have a limited capacity in some of the buildings. So again, that's most of this stuff will come together by mid-August. We'll have if we're able today to commit to at least a student schedule, and we can get that information out to parents and ask them to make a choice for this upcoming year, we'll know how many students we have coming into the building. By that time, we'll have a good handle on the number of staff that are going to be available, and also the ventilation, so that we can fine tune our plan based on those limitations. And again, it is a plan, and as Mr. McEnroe said, we just need to be flexible through this. But I still feel very strongly, and I keep referring back to Secretary Rivera's words, we need to plan for the best case and prepare for the worst. And I feel like under any of these options, except for option 4, that we're doing that.
Lori?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was muted. So under, I don't know if it was option 2 or option 3 that you said at no point there won't be more than 50% of the students in the building. Which option were you talking about, Brian?
That's option 3.
So at option 2, there will be a possibility that if by chance, and I know we keep saying like all the kids aren't coming, but if by chance all the kids came, option 2 would be a possibility that could actually happen. So are we, will we, is there a way that, because I asked the other day on the call, like if a parent or somebody has their kid in virtual and they decide like in a week, oh, this isn't working, I want my kid in school, and at that moment there was an option to say, oh yeah, you can bring them back, we can work that out. Are we going to, like Brother D said, are we going to crack down and make that like, listen, once you sign your kid up for virtual, because then we'll start throwing numbers and everything off, right, in a building, and before you know it, just like Walmart, we'll get back to being real lax, okay, and it'll be a full-fledged building, and it just put everything back in a whole high gear of panic mode, right? I think that the 50% at least gives some kind of comfort, but do we have a way to ensure that parents we're not going to let them shift?
Lori, I'm going to talk for a minute while I think Brian's looking for something. I think,
okay.
So with option 3, we would look at the total enrollment and slice that in half. So I know Brian and I have had some discussions that, we want parents and families to commit to a quarter. Certainly there may be situations that come up that we could handle on a case-by-case basis. But I think that we could ensure, if we're in that cohort model, we could assign students if we do determine that it's in their best interest to return to buildings, that we could keep those cohorts at 50% or half. Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just think that is really an important thing. I can definitely, for me it is, because I feel like numbers, I know we keep talking about people go to Walmart and shop, but you go to Giant Eagle, but everybody has like those contained numbers anymore where they're like counting the people who come in. And I know that the schools aren't under that same, mandate, but I don't think it kills us to take that extra step to, add that into our regulations of how we're seeing this, because we are trying to keep them just as safe as, we are when we're going to whatever store we choose to go to. I don't go to Walmart if I see 1,000 cars there, I'm like, I wait till the morning when they first open, so just thinking like, I want that same precaution, I guess, is how I'm looking at it for our students and our teachers. So as long as we can figure that out, that's a big part for me. So thank you for that, though. That helped.
Can I, Mr. President, can I speak?
Yes.
It's Rose. I just want you guys all to be aware, Brian and Teresa, that the teachers and the administrations are calling for clear policies from us and consequences and things for parents and students. So if we say we're going to do something, then we need to do it. And I agree with Lori on that. If we say this is the protocol that's going to be followed, then we need to stick with it. And I understand there are situations, but, that's my feeling.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially when we're looking at option 2 and 3, especially 3. If we say that we're going to give everybody the opportunity to come to school every other day, then we can't make any exceptions and have certain individuals come in on the off day. I think that's all or none. If we want to provide choice, I think we need to look at option 1 or 2.
So how do we proceed from here, John or Tim? Are we just all going to discuss our points of view, and then following that discussion, we'll come up with either yes, we like to choose one of these options? How do we go from here?
We can't
Could I suggest maybe we see if we can take one off the table? Based on the conversations I've had and what I've heard today, I don't think there's a lot of support to go 100% virtual next year.
Right. So I would propose to, just in the discussion that I've been kind of having a little bit here, to let's take this down to option 2 and option 3. Although 1 was great when that was the plan, I think option 2 and option 3 are better. Option 4 doesn't have much support. So I would recommend maybe if we could just in our conversations to option 2 and 3, would people be supportive of path?
Consensus.
Could we go 1, 2, 3, and 4 and see if thumbs up, thumbs down on each of them?
Mr. President?
Who's that, Darlene?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Before we do that, can I ask the solicitor a question?
Sure.
So what happens if students get confused about what their day is? What's going to be our liability when they show up to school on the wrong day?
Sure.
Well,
we're going to have to make sure that we're providing a consistency in the level of education that we provide to these students. We're going to have to make sure that if the kids come in, that we're going to have some sort of protocol in place in order to get them back home or get them to a safe place. From a FAPE perspective, we're mostly concerned with the special education students, although the regular education students still do have a right to an education under that as well. However, we would still be providing for that right, that educational opportunity through remote learning on the off days. So I'm not worried from an educational perspective regarding liability. I just want to make sure that we have proper protocols in place to handle those kids, and that would be more administrative for how that would happen. So I would think that Brian, I'm looking for you to agree that should this board decide to go with either an option to go with option 3, that you would put appropriate administrative protocols in place to take care of those kids and get them back home, and and deliver that message.
Yes, and I think that's an example of something that we would need to build into the health and safety plan based on the selection.
Thank you.
We can't make a binding vote on anything here today, but we can, apparently the solicitor has said it's okay to express our preferences, but Monday is the day we'll vote on something because that was the purpose of the meeting being called. So if you want to take a read on where everyone is, and if that's what the consensus is to do that, I would just suggest we go 1, 2, 3, and 4, and yes or no. Is that what we're after, everyone?
I just have a question, Mr. President. Aren't 2 and 3 the same?
The only difference between 2 and 3 is we, under the green phase, we allow, give parents the option to send their kids to school on the day that they're scheduled to be home.
That's option 3.
Two.
Okay.
Yeah. Option 3 is no option. You're going every other day, and there's no option to come to school on the off day.
And you participate remotely?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Can we go 1, 2, 3, and 4 and get a yes or no on each one, and then realize that 2 days are going to pass, and then we're going to assemble again to actually vote. We'll have the benefit of 2 days, no matter what is preferred here. There's still 2 days to think about it, to question, to discuss among ourselves. But if that's what the board wants to do, is to see where we stand on each of these options, let's take them one at a time. Option 1 is the plan proposed by the administration. You want to make any remarks on that, Brian, before I ask for a yes or no?
Oh, I think we beat that up pretty good on the other day, on Tuesday.
All right. I still favor it, so I'm yes for option 1. Does anybody else support option 1? And all 8 of you oppose it then? I guess it's not going to matter.
Well, I'm opposing it. Because I want something else that makes sense. I am not saying to take it completely off the table, but I would like something else. I'm not quite sure how you're doing the voting at this point.
Just trying to make this simple and clear, but again, Monday's Monday, and that's when we'll have an actual formal final vote to go in some direction or yes or no.
Mr. Harkins, would it make sense to ask if there are any other board members in favor of keeping option 1 on the table at this time?
Are there any other board members who are in favor of keeping option 1 on the table at this time? I do. Okay, apparently I'm the only one. Next, we'll have option 2. Mr. Superintendent, you want to make any remarks about that or clarify anything?
Only if there's questions.
Okay.
Mr. President.
When?
So Mr. Polito, help me. So if a child should come to school and it's not their day, they'll be placed in an overflow space under option 2?
Only in green. So we,
right.
On yellow, if they come to school on an off day, we would have to make arrangements to return them home or another safe place.
All right, thank you.
Okay, who supports option 2?
I do. Tom.
Who else?
I do, Gwen.
Okay, Gwen. Supporting means leaving it on the table, leaving it alive. Okay.
So the option 2 is the option where we could possibly have however many students show up on that day and be in the building, correct?
No.
No? I thought option 3 was the regulated cap on the.
Yeah, option 2, every student under green and yellow, every student goes every other day, no exceptions. Option 3, that's the case, or option 2, that's the case in yellow, every other day, no exceptions. Option 2, green phase, we give parents the option to send their kids in on the off day.
So that either we would never really fully have a gauge number of who would be in a building on green phase and option 2.
Well, we would have them commit just like option, so that we can handle on how many kids are there.
Mr. Polito, Sterling, because we're going to be using the overflow areas, would our students in option 2 be receiving art, music, and gym?
Yes. So I think if you look at McKinley or the plan that Deal submitted, they're going to put some of those specials on like art on a cart or music to make sure that those students have that. They're trying to those classrooms to spread the kids out.
So what about general education?
I'm sorry. So Brian, with option 2, we would have a family commit. So could either go every other day as planned here, or I could say I want my child to go full time, but I have to commit a McKinley school, whatever school my child goes to. My child will be attending every day for the first quarter or whatever time you have defined.
Yeah, we would do first quarter, and again, trying to eliminate all the options and scheduling issues. You either commit to going to school, on those remote days every day of the week, or you stay home, just to kind of keep it simple.
So with this is, as Brother D would say, has the most amount of parent option there. Plus, we would have a finite number so we can logistically plan.
Yes. Yes, and then, I heard some of the comments on Tuesday about yellow and green being the same in our plan. So this again makes it more restrictive if we go to yellow phase. We say it's not safe to bring every student in. We're going a strict 50% of the students every day.
Are we calling the yellow phase, or are we saying when the city goes to a yellow? So at a school, let's say Piper Burley's like, you know what, we're going to have to be in yellow phase mode because so the school gets to determine what color phase they feel that they will be in.
I would not say the school. I would say the superintendent.
Well, I mean, yeah, you know. Okay.
Move through what I thought you wanted to do, and so for option 2, Tom and Gwen have expressed support to leave it alive. Is there any other board member who wishes to do that?
Mr. President?
Okay, I raised my hand and I said, Mr. President.
I know, Angela, but did you hear what I just said?
Okay, but don't let Darlene or nobody else talk.
How do you feel about option 2?
That's what I'm trying to say. First of all, I don't even think I think there should be another option on the table. Like
there's 4 of them.
I know. What I see the ones on this chart, but what I'm saying is it's still kind of confusing for me because and I don't like when y'all do that. Like what you know what I'm saying? Everybody else gets to say what they want to say. Then when certain people want to have something to say, all of a sudden you got to move along or they get cut off. I don't like that. Don't do that to me. That's what I'm gonna tell you first of all. I don't like being disrespected. Okay, I got elected just like the rest of these people got elected and got more votes than some of these people got. So don't cut me off when I'm trying to talk. And then somebody on the line muted me. And I don't know who did it, but don't do that to me either because you ain't mute nobody else. Let's just get that straight first. Now, enough is enough. Now, and then my thing is, you all like I still feel like there should be another part of the plan where the every other day, like there's no option of students, if we don't know how many people even want to come to school, there might be an option where if there's not a lot of people that don't want to come to school, why isn't there an option that the people that do want to go to school come 5 days a week? I don't understand why that's not on the table. And I'm talking about in-person, in-class learning. So if we got 11,000 kids in the district and 2,000 kids only want to come, you saying that 2,000 kids only filled out the survey online. What if that really is the number? What if it's only 2,000 kids? Why can't they come 5 days a week and do in-person learning? That's my question.
Well, that's addressed in 2. What you're suggesting, Angela.
I'm not, Tom. I thought
Q and green.
Angela, but you didn't support it. I was the only one who did. I thought that's exactly what I was.
Because when I'm looking at it, I'm reading it and I heard you talking, but it doesn't, so remote instruction is just, or option one is just strictly going to school, in-person learning, and then going to cyber school. Is that what option one is? That's what I'm trying to read it and understand it. And when people not, yeah.
That's only phase red of it.
Okay, go ahead and explain to me. I just need an explanation.
Okay. So option one is what we proposed on Monday. So we, again, the way the schedule is structured, these kids, in order to accommodate social distancing in the class, are going to be in front of their teacher every other day. So in our option, we proposed that families could send their kids in on the off days, and we gave them options of being there every day, being there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, being there Tuesday and Thursday. So we were providing the maximum amount of options for families under our plan that was originally submitted. The option two still provides, under the green phase, parents the ability to send their kids in every day. It's just that we, based on some of the feedback I heard from the board, we wanted to maybe get a little more restrictive if things moved to yellow or we decided that it wasn't working. And that's why we don't have that choice under the yellow phase in option two.
I just don't know. Like, if there's truly only 2,000 people that responded and only 2,000 students out of 11,000 show up, then I just really don't. I feel like they should get in-person instruction every 5 days, like in a classroom, and they should be in that same classroom with the same teachers and have the same routine so that everything stays structured. Because my only concern is like students like my daughters and other people's children that I know who they have certain like special needs students, the students with disabilities and special needs. That's one big concern of mine too. The inconsistency of not having a daily routine. And not that I'm even planning on sending my daughters back. So it's not for me anything personal, but as a mother who knows how students with disabilities operate and how my two daughters have autism, and I know a lot of other students with disabilities. They need a routine, or they might need to see their speech therapists that only come into the schools and things like that. So my question is just based off the fact that some students might need that routine, and if there's an ability, because if there's only 2,000 students that are signing up, there is an ability there for them to come every day in the classroom as scheduled. So that's just my comment. So whatever plan that falls under where the students can actually attend 5 days a week is great. But my thing is, if it ain't a lot of students attending, then I just would like to see an option where they can do in person 5 days a week, or will we make an exception for students with disabilities? Might be might be handicapped or have any type of disabilities. And I'm talking about students that are not pushing students. I'm talking about some of the students that are in specific classrooms, like how my daughters are in autistic support. They don't push in at all. So that would be a question of mine. How are we going to handle those students?
So just a couple things. First of all, I want to assure the board that, under all these options, we've already made the decision to prioritize space for our special education students and our trade students, so that because they have to be in school for their instruction. So we're going to prioritize that and get them in as much as possible. I think we could probably ensure that everybody that needs to be there is there in both of those two categories. The other thing, Angela, I just want to clarify is that the 2,000 is the number of responses from the survey that we sent out. And so it showed that 50% of the families were more interested, or 47 were interested in having some type of in-person instruction.
board seemed to have wanted a few minutes ago to go through these options and see what the majority was on them, and that's all I was trying to do. We got two options, and
Mr. President,
I just want to say that Monday is the day we're going to vote. If you want to think about these options through the weekend, we could move on to other things here. But if you want to keep asking questions and expressing concerns, that's up to you.
Mr. President.
Rose?
Darlene.
Darlene. I apologize. I just don't know that I felt that my question that I asked was understood, or maybe it was understood. You answered it to me, and I'm just being thick now. I am wondering if we started in option 3 and offering it, and we find that we are going to have extra space. Could we then go back and offer option 2 because we have less people who have signed up that want their students in school? I'm just concerned about space, and the reason I'm concerned about space is that at some point in time we might have teachers or staff that do test positive for COVID and aren't able to come to school or get sick, or other family situations occur, and we can't fill that teacher's position for that day. And then we really are dealing with overflow issues and staffing issues. So I want to move cautiously. So again, the question is, can we offer our parents option 3? And if we find that we do have the capacity for all of the board to feel comfortable, to myself at least, to allow to offer option 2, that we could move to that.
Yes, and actually, I think that's a great idea. The more I think about it, because that we'll know then after the first month how many students are going to be there and how many students actually want to come in, and it'll also give us an opportunity to work out any kinks we have in the scheduling and the system. So I think that's great. I think it's similar to what Mr. Nichols was proposing, going for a month in red, which we still can switch to that if we feel the situation warrants it.
Okay, so you're, Mr. President?
Yes.
Okay, so Brian, you're proposing to start out in 3, get a feel for the parents, and then we could always go to 2, which I also like, but.
Yeah, I think.
I agree with that.
I agree with that. 3 is 3. The green, is that what 3 is?
3 has 3 colors. Each of these options have 3 colors.
Okay.
So Angela, what 3 is that we start out originally telling parents that your children can come every other day, and or they can receive remote instruction, or they can go to the cyber academy. Once we see how many students we have coming, if we see that we have the capacity to safely add more students, then we can go back to the parents and say, okay, we can now offer you option 2, where even on the B day or the day that they're off, they can still come back to school because we have the space to accommodate them. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
I can go along with that, but I just want to make sure that provisions are made for students with special needs. That's a concern of mine.
I agree with you.
So that's all. I mean, if y'all agree on that you're talking about, I'm fine with that. But I just want to make sure the students with special needs are taken care of.
Hey, John, can I speak real quick?
Yes, Tom.
Would we be able to, at this point, poll the board and see how many people would be in favor of just what we're discussing now? We start off in 3. If the situations allow, we can move in to 2, and then from there maybe we can kind of see to give the staff something to work forward to on Monday, and then we'll be able to have the official vote at that time.
That's what I was trying to do, Tom. But again,
right. But it seems like right now there's kind of a hybrid. So I propose right now, could we please take a vote? Who would support? I would, in fact, support starting off in 3, moving forward as situations allow to 2. How many other people would be in favor of that?
Anybody want to weigh in and say that they feel?
I would be.
That Lori?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Lori. That's me.
Tom? Darlene? Is there anybody besides Lori and Tom who feel that way?
Darlene was a yes.
That would, if that's what I agree. If that's what Darlene was just talking about, yeah.
Darlene and Angela are yeses on that.
And Rose is.
And Rose, that's 5 people.
I'm a yes, with knowing that we could move to option 4 or option 2 if need be, like Mr. Polito had said.
That's Tyler. Yep.
That's Tyler, gotcha. Well, there is a majority, but again, Monday's 2 days away, and we still have time to think about this, but at some point we do have to zero in on some course of action.
I also like that 3, other than I think we should open in 4 for the first month. I mean, the state hasn't set standards on the infection rate. We had the health department here. They didn't even tell us what the current our current infection rate is, or how many cases there have been in the city. I mean, we're struggling with this, but they're not doing their job. They're not providing us information, and that's part of the problem. All of us are.
Some are on option 1, and you can still stubbornly cling to option 4, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if the majority of the rest of the board wants to do that hybrid form of 3 and 2, the administration hears that, and as we approach Monday, they can perhaps be prepared to help bring that into focus.
Mr. President,
When?
what's all on option 4? Is it just remote and cyber?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I think we've kind of beaten this to death. I mean, I don't think we can do anything more about this decision-making process here at this point. So next on the agenda, I have the health and safety aspect of the plan. Mr. Polito, do you have anything more to say about that today?
Well, I think, if we're able to come to a consensus on this 3 moving to 2 option, then that'll give us some direction, and we can start pulling together the information to send out the families on that. We still have not discussed the health and safety plan. I think we answered all of your questions and put them in the portal, except for a few that Darlene sent over earlier this morning. We'll get those answered and out to you as soon as possible. So my question is, at this point, how do you want to proceed with the health and safety plan? I know we're going to have to adjust it based on some of these, based on the change in the instruction, but given the review and the Department of Health's blessing, is there anything else you want us to include in this?
Mr. Polito?
Yes.
Mr. President, I would like for you to look at what the cost would be for the waterless hand soap stations, to see if we could just get a feel of the cost for those.
Another concern of mine too is to have the sanitation, even at least in every hallway, preferably in every class, outside of every classroom. I feel like there should be a I feel like there should be a hand sanitizer machine outside of every classroom. Every classroom that is kid, or every space that anybody has to go into or walk into, I feel like there needs to be automatic machine. So that's one concern of mine, because as the man said, when you do the proper precautions, you can still catch the virus, but you have less of a chance of catching it when you do follow those. And also, are we going to be providing mask on site for students who don't bring it? Yes, okay.
Yeah, and the hand sanitizer, the stations are all in the plan. We, again, going back to the building specifics, we can't put specific locations on hand sanitizing or washing statements for every single building in this plan. It's just not the framework for it. So we once the general framework that we have provided you is approved, then we move into the building and we start doing things like Deal did and putting all those specifics and details in there. We set the building up. We have the Department of Health walk through at least 2 of our buildings, and then we get the checklist and we walk through and make sure that everything is in compliance with what they're looking for.
Mr. Polito, I will say that yesterday that we walked through and I was more impressed with the attitudes of the staff and the principals and the other staff members who gave us a tour. They seemed to know the answers. I feel that they were willing to adapt, overcome, and kind of figure some things out as we go. But they had a good, positive attitude. I feel that they were thinking about the students' needs at first and foremost. So I feel pretty confident in the school leadership. And more than that, just like what Lori was saying, those custodians, or I'm not sure exactly what terms they were, these guys were pretty squared away. They knew what they were talking about going forward, that they are playing a key role going forward.
Lori?
Yeah, so I got a question. Will the teams who did all this, so I'm looking at the safety plan and how you have all the teams who are set with creating this, are you guys going to continue to meet throughout while we're in motion? And then I have another question. Can we add, can you open up to get a parent of a student from every school to have them at the table, right? If you can find a parent, is that an option to be present during all of these meetings as we're moving forward? And at least they can kind of add some input because they have, a child in the building, I don't know if that's something that you guys can do, you're thinking of. And also, is it possible, and I mean, everybody might not, be on board with this, but is it possible that all the board members can agree to once a month doing visits to the school? Because I mean, we're making a lot of decisions, but we're also not present in the buildings. And I don't know how every school will feel about it. Some schools might say we don't want, anyone visiting, but I just think that will definitely show us being a part of the walk, right? While we're having all the conversation about it. So that's just something I want to put out there and suggest. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in the building. I just think it would definitely show the support of we're really walking with you.
And Brian, I would suggest if there's any way possible, I know how we did our one meeting where we were I think we were able to stream it on social media. I know we can't do a community meeting at East or anything like that, but is there any, and I don't want to put more stress on the team that's already on there, but like Brother Darrell said earlier in the conversation, that the community needs to have some say so. So whether 10 or 200 people show up on a live meeting and parents may be able to ask questions as the one meeting we had where people were on the line and they were able to ask questions. That might be an idea so that the community does feel like they had some type of say so. So I don't know if that's an option, but it's something to think about. So if the community is saying they want to be involved in some of these decisions that we're making, maybe set up a live Zoom where they have an opportunity to speak and and say how they feel about the safe return to the buildings.
Yeah, we absolutely could do that, and that's Lori. That might be a way that we can get the parent input. I think having a representative from every school on every committee is just going to make it a little difficult to manage as far as those building meetings go. But we could definitely do a town hall type of meeting. We were talking about, once all of this was approved, to do something like that with our staff members. And instead of having one big meeting with 200, we have people sign up in advance so that we could space it out based on participation. So it's smaller groups, like 30 staff or 30 parents or less, so that we can have that interaction and everybody has an opportunity to ask questions.
Mr. President, this is directed to Mr. Polito or even Mr. Brockman. According to the health plan, each school entity is required to identify a pandemic coordinator or team and define their roles and responsibilities. Has that been done yet?
Yes, it's not each building, it's the district, and the pandemic team is listed on page 5 of the.
Right, I'm looking at it. That's where I'm getting that information from. So we're not doing individual team, we're just gonna do a district person as it states.
Yes, we're not doing individual buildings because we want to coordinate the response. So we want those decisions about the buildings to come through central office.
All right.
Tyler?
Mr. President, so the question that I just had was around funding. Was there state or federal funding given just for the purchase of, PPE, the sanitizer, all that kind of stuff? Just because I know that question is going to come up too.
Yes, that was the CARES Act money. We shared with you the $6.8 million, and I don't know if Neil's still on. How much did we allocate towards cleaning?
Through CARES, we put $1 million towards PPE, and then as far as cleaning supplies are concerned, we actually are purchasing an entire year's worth of our normal supplies with CARES money. So we'll be buying our normal amount with general fund, and we legitimately will have an entire year's worth purchased through CARES money. So we basically have 2 years worth of cleaning solutions for this upcoming year.
Thank you.
Is that just for the custodians, or is that for, I'm sorry, I should have asked, but is that for the custodians, or is that for even the things that the teachers would need in their room? Will they have everything provided as well?
So the teachers will have everything that they're going to be provided as well. Once we started doing breakfast in the classroom, each of the teachers were given a spray bottle with our 64H cleaning solution. And so it's part of our annual year costs. So we plan on buying 2 years worth of 64H. We plan on buying 2 years worth of hydrogen peroxide cleaner.
Brian, Darlene here. I know you know that nursing services was the second thing that was really weighing on my mind. Are we going to be able to use any of that CARES money to put more towards PPE for our nurses? And can we have a nurse assigned to every building? That's really going to be important to me. I'm so worried that they're going to get overwhelmed with the tasks that they're going to have to do. It would be nice to have a CSN and a part-time LPN in every building. And well, some buildings are so huge, they probably should have 2, like Erie High. I guess it just depends on numbers. I do it that way.
Manpower is always going to be an issue there, but we are talking to a firm that can commit at least to doing the screenings for the kids in the morning. So that's not on the nurses or our staff. We're hoping that they'll also be able to add, an additional nurse or somebody to assist with things during the day. But again, that depends on, how many people are out there and what they can handle.
Brian, can I just add to that? Like you have 2, I understood yesterday by our tour, you have 2 brand new nurses that are going to be starting at Erie High. Can you have somebody on site, like a substitute that was the old time nurse there, to be with them, to work with them, because that pay is much cheaper, but they're going to need somebody up there to direct them.
Okay.
Do you think that way too, Darlene? I mean, that was my feeling about the nursing part.
That's a great idea, Rose. Mentoring is an excellent way to do it.
Okay, we'll see what we can do.
You want to evaluate the superintendent today?
Well, but before we move on to that, are we comfortable with adjusting the health and safety plan for the decision we made on the schedule and bringing that to you on Monday, knowing that we can adjust this plan at any time and will likely need to do so probably multiple times before the start of the school?
Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 I would say yes. I still want to read through the questions and the answers too, Brian. So I'll give you a call this weekend. But yes.
Monday comes, if you change your minds entirely, you have that right on any of this.
Mr. Harkins, I have a question for Mr. Polito.
Go ahead.
What made us decide to go with before Labor Day versus after Labor Day in opening?
We made that decision pre-COVID, and it was because Labor Day was so late this year, and we wanted to, we were looking to the Erie High construction project next year and wanted to make sure we allocated time for the contractors in the summer.
Thank you.
Is there any other matter which any director wants to talk about? How many are up for an executive session?
I am.
Majority wants to, well, we have things to talk about, but if the majority is talking, that's reality too.
As long as we can be brief.
You ask me to guarantee that, Tom?
I guarantee I will be brief.
I'm also perfectly fine waiting till Monday. None of those items need to be discussed today if you'd like to wait.
All right.
I'm hoping Monday will be a much shorter meeting than today.
I had hoped it would be differently, but I respect that.
Brian, do you need an answer on those things though?
It can wait till Monday.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
So if that's the case, I'll just ask one more time. Is there anything else? Any other questions or concern? Otherwise, we'll adjourn this and then we'll meet again on Monday to deal with the official voting on proceeding with reopening.
Mr. President, one last thing. Because I heard it mentioned 3 times. Gwen alluded to it. Nick, Sumner talked about it. And it was brought up in, I think, maybe Brother D, an acclimation period. So when you're starting to think about all this, maybe we should start to think about moving school back a little bit just to give us more time to implement this plan successfully.
Okay. I think Teresa and her scheduling teams have been talking about some of those ideas. I don't know if you want to weigh in, Teresa.
Sure. One of the things we were talking about is possibly a staggered start, just to get kids used to the new way of doing things in the classrooms. We haven't figured out whether or not we're going to maybe do a couple grade levels at a time, but we're trying to work through that. And I should be able to bring you something very soon now that we kind of have a direction here.
I like that.
I want to say to Mrs. McNair, I am the second oldest man here, and I don't know how to mute anybody. So I didn't touch my computer, and I did not mute you. And if you thought I did, I have to plead not guilty.
If I can address that, Mr. Harkins.
Mr. Doctor.
From time to time when you're on Zoom, if for whatever reason, various people's systems, if they don't mute their system, there's going to be a feedback loop, and that's when you start hearing the echoes throughout the Zoom. And so our technician here has been muting all of the board members whenever that feedback loop has started, so that we can continue the conversation without that. It's nothing personal. It's just a function of having to use this technology. And if anybody else has any other questions on it, I'd be happy to answer that.
Well, thank you for that. I just don't want to be inaccurately branded as a muter.
Mr. President, if that helps any, I've been muted.
Rose, I have sinned in my heart. I have entertained the idea of wanting to, but I never did it because I don't know how.
Mr. President, I make motion to end this meeting.
Okay.
Hold on, Mr. Spiegel. One second. One second. I'll be quick. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody for coming back. I know emotions have been high. This is very tense. And I know that we annoy the crap out of each other sometimes, but we were still able to come back and surprisingly reach a pretty solid consensus today, which I know it took us 3 hours to get there, but we did it. So thank you for everybody who, again, cleared their schedule and weighed in.
Have a good weekend. Yes, it's Friday.
Rose, I cut you off. Rose, I cut you off when I made my muting speech. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No. I just wanted to tell you during the meeting I got muted. And I didn't take it personally.
You guys, it's the weekend.
We don't need a motion to adjourn a committee of the whole meeting, so the committee of the whole meeting is hereby adjourned. See you Monday.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.